What if Harry Potter was never raised by the Dursleys? What if, before the wizarding world could claim him, baby Harry was found in the rainy forests of Forks by the Cullens, raised by vampires, protected by monsters, and taught control before he ever learned magic? Harry Potter would not arrive at Hogwarts as a lonely boy. He would arrive as something darker, calmer, and far more dangerous. This is the story of Harry Potter, adopted by the Cullens. Subscribe if you are new. Also, I write my own stories, so if you have any suggestions, drop below. Now let's get started.
Rosalie Hale was not a woman who surprised easily. She had been dead for 51 years, 12 of those spent among the Cullens, and in that time she had seen enough of the world's cruelty that little of it could still reach her. She hunted under the cold spring of the Olympic Peninsula because Esme had asked her to, and because the alternative was another evening watching Emmett destroy a television with his elbow. A scent came to her over the alder trees, something carried on the breeze off the strait, and it stopped her in her tracks as surely as a hand to the chest. It was blood, and it was magic, and it was a child. She had smelled blood before, of course she had, in every shape and state, but never like this. This was warm iron wrapped in something stranger, something that vibrated behind the usual notes like the hum of a plucked wire. Her jaw tightened against the thirst and she moved, because she had never been the kind of vampire who froze. 2 miles northwest of Forks, at the lip of a cedar stand, she found him. He lay in a blanket the color of old blood. Not a blanket, she realized after a second, a shawl, knitted thickly with silver thread and darker thread and stitched with symbols she could not read. The shawl had melted the snow around it in a perfect circle, as if whatever fabric it was made of refused to touch cold. Inside it was a baby, maybe 15 months old, black-haired, swaddled into a puff, asleep under a star-empty sky. There was blood on his forehead. A cut above the right eyebrow had split into a shape that, if Rosalie had been a woman who believed in signs, she would have called a rune. The cut had crusted over but not closed. There was no parent, there were no tracks, there was no aircraft sound fading overhead. There was only a November night that smelled like a thunderstorm that had forgotten to happen and a child alone under the trees. No. Rosalie said to nobody in particular, because she had already lost the argument with herself. She picked him up. Esme heard the car before it came in sight and was on the porch before Rosalie killed the engine. Carlyle was at her shoulder, already reading the set of Rosalie's jaw. Edward came out of the side door in the same second, having heard whatever he had heard in Rosalie's thoughts. His face had gone a peculiar blank, like an equation that refused to balance. "I found him," Rosalie said, in a voice that dared any of them to say the wrong thing. "He was under the cedars by the old logging cut. There was nobody. There is nobody. I went in a half-mile ring. There isn't a print. There isn't a smell. He came out of nowhere." She lifted the bundle, and the shawl's symbols shifted in the porch light like oil on water. "Carlyle, he's hurt." His head. Carlyle's hand was on the baby's brow before Rosalie had finished talking. He did not speak for a long moment. When he did, his voice had the hushed clinician's precision that his family knew meant something was very wrong and very interesting at once. "He's fine. He's warm. He's healthy." He looked up. "Esme, please take him inside." Esme took him as if she had been practicing all her life for the weight of him. The baby woke then, eyes slitting open against the porch light, and they were the greenest eyes Esme had ever seen. They did not look frightened. They looked at her, considered her, and decided she would do. "Oh," said Esme very quietly. "Oh." Edward was still standing on the porch. He had not moved toward the child. "I can't hear him," Edward said. Carlyle's head came up. "You can't. There's nothing there, not noise, not static." "It's like putting my hand against a wall." Edward's brow drew down. "I have never felt that. Not even with Bella's mother's friend that one time, not even with this is different, Carlyle. This is a wall someone built." From inside the house, Alice's laughter came like a chime struck against a glass. "I saw it 12 minutes ago. Rose, the bottle in the cabinet. No, the other cabinet. I bought them on a whim last week. Don't ask me why." "Alice," Carlyle said. "Yes," Alice sang. "He stays." He stayed. Emmett came home carrying a deer carcass over his shoulder, took one look at the infant sleeping on Esme's chest, opened his mouth and closed it again. Then he set the deer on the porch, came inside and whispered like a man who had discovered religion in the wrong room, "Guys, guys. Can I hold him?" "No," said Rosalie. "Rose." "No." Jasper was the last home, and for Jasper the matter was not sentimental but chemical. He stopped at the edge of the living room, eyes going to black bright glass, fingers going very still at his sides. Carlyle moved smoothly to intercept. "I've got him," said Jasper thinly. "Give me a minute." "Take the minute." He stood in the doorway and breathed. They did not need to breathe, and they knew better than to fill the lungs fully, but breathing in that moment for Jasper was a discipline. He breathed the way a boxer holds a stance. After a minute that lasted about 9, he said without moving, "He smells wrong. Not bad wrong, wrong like something won't let me bite him. He smells like he belongs to someone already and that someone is still holding him." "Alice," Esme said, "did we marry a poet?" "Yes," said Alice happily. Jasper came another step into the room and then another. By the time he reached the couch, the thirst had quieted to a manageable hum. He looked down at the baby on Esme's chest. The cut on his forehead was no longer crusted. Under Esme's palm it had already begun to close. Jasper exhaled. "There are protections on him," he said. "I can feel them on the air. Somebody put wards on this child. Somebody who loved him did the last thing she could." Esme closed her eyes for a moment. She had not known she needed Jasper to say it, and now that he had said it, she had to wait half a minute before she could speak. "We are not his parents," she managed. "No," Carlyle said gently, "but whoever his parents were, they are not here to take him, and whoever put this—" He lifted the corner of the shawl and the silver threads glinted, "put it here so that he would be taken somewhere safe. I have never in my life," he broke off, and the Cullens watched him, because it was rare that Carlyle interrupted himself. "I have read in the Volturi Library about people who can do things we cannot. A hidden society, a bloodline separated from ours by practice and by choice. I did not think I would meet one. I certainly did not think I would meet one who could not walk yet. He's a wizard." Alice said matter-of-factly, "He's going to be a very famous one." "Alice, I'm not telling you the rest." She grinned at Carlyle. "Not yet." They named him in the small hours. Esme argued for keeping what he had come with. There was a name stitched into the inside of the shawl in a hand that the Cullens recognized as a mother's. Harry. Rosalie looked at that stitched name for a long time and did not cry because she could not, but she did sit down on the edge of the couch and set her palm against the baby's back and let it rest there in a way none of them had ever seen her do before. "Harry," she said, testing it. "James." Added Carlyle because there was a second name beneath the first in smaller stitches, fainter. "Harry James," Esme agreed. "Potter," Edward said. He was standing at the window. "The shawl has P embroidered in the corner. Somebody wanted him to know." He turned. "Cullen, though, we owe him that." "He's ours now." "Harry James Cullen Potter," Carlyle said, and it was the first time any of them had said the whole of it aloud. It settled into the house like a load-bearing beam. Alice laid her head on Jasper's shoulder and smiled at the ceiling. "Somebody on the other side of the world." She said, "Just lost track of you. I'm sorry, old man, he's staying with us." On the other side of the world, Albus Dumbledore stood in Godric's Hollow with snow in his beard and ash on his hands, and for the first time since the Grindelwald summer he did not know what to do. The ruin of the Potter cottage had finished smoldering. James lay where he had fallen at the foot of the stair. Lily lay in the nursery beside the crib, arms still half raised to the place where the crib had been. The crib was not there. "Albus," Minerva McGonagall said at his elbow, "the wards." "Yes, they fell before he died. He got inside," she swallowed, "but the child is not in the house. Perhaps Hagrid has just arrived." Dumbledore's voice was very quiet. "Look." The great man was kneeling at the edge of the garden, the sidecar of Sirius Black's motorcycle empty beside him. He had uncovered the crib in the ruin. It was empty as well. "He was here," Hagrid rasped. His hands shook in the soot. "He were meant ter be here, sir. The Lady Lily had him in the cradle, I can tell, his smells in the blanket left behind. But there's," he turned the blanket over in his great palms and frowned, "there's a thread through it. A kind of a, it ain't one of ours, sir." Dumbledore took the blanket and tipped it to catch the moonlight. The silver thread ran through the weave in a pattern that his Akami hide gloves registered as warm. A protective rune. A portkey rune pressed flat by a mother's hand and left dormant until the worst possible moment. "She sent him away," said McGonagall in an astonished whisper. "Yes," said Dumbledore, "and the protection on the portkey is old and deep. My instruments will not find him. The trace will not find him. He has gone to someone of her blood in a place where the portkey believed him to be safest." "That is a broad territory, Minerva. That is, it is a very long net we will have to cast. Albus, if you know who, is gone." He lowered the blanket. "I do not know how yet. I do not know for how long, but the child is alive and the child is no longer ours to place." He turned and looked at her with eyes that had for half a moment gone very tired. "We have lost him, Minerva. For the time being we have lost him. You say that as if we should not look. I say it as if we cannot find him against his mother's wishes, and Lily," he paused. "Lily did not trust me at the end with everything. I am not pleased, but I will not be the man who undoes what she did on her last night. We will watch, we will wait. When he is ready, if he is ready, we will find him." He looked at the house and at Lily and at James, and he folded the blanket with the reverence of a man burying someone he had loved insufficiently. Snow fell on Forks the next morning. It fell on the long green drive of the Cullen house and on the pale cedar rails of the porch, and it did not stay on the window glass because someone inside had cracked the window to let a little noise of the forest in. The noise was a baby babbling at Esme Cullen's jaw. Rosalie sat on the arm of the couch with her hands in her lap and her mouth slightly open, as if she had forgotten she was supposed to be angry about something. Alice sat on the floor in front of the fireplace, cross-legged, eyes shut, fingertips resting on one knee, practicing being very patient with a future that was very loud. "He's going to be a handful," she said, without opening her eyes. "He's going to be a handful at 7 and at 11 and at 14 and at the end." Edward, across the room, said, "What end, Alice?" "Don't know yet. Alice, I mean it." She opened her eyes. They were the calm, happy eyes of a person who had just learned where a door led. "I mean, I can see a little. I can see him growing up. I can see him at a piano, badly. I can see him on a broom, beautifully. I can see him in robes that don't fit him. I can see him running, and I can see people chasing him, and I can see him running faster. I can't see every part because something is old enough to cover him, but I can see enough to know that we made the right decision. He is going to cost us," Edward said quietly. "Yes, he is going to bring them to us. Yes, you're smiling. Edward," Alice tilted her head at him. "He's ours." "We're going to cost them more." Carlyle came down the stairs. He had washed his hands, he had changed, and in his arms he carried a book. He set it on the coffee table. The cover was in Latin and the spine in what Edward's eye caught as very old Cyrillic, and the book was thick enough to double as an anvil. "Volturi Library," Carlyle said. "Property of, I borrowed this in 1923. It has never been asked after." He opened it and turned to a page marked by a gray ribbon. "The Hidden World of Wand-Carrying Blood. I have read it only twice. I had, in truth, more or less forgotten it. I thought I might like to refresh." Esme looked at him over the baby's head. "You think he will need us to understand it?" "I think we will need us to understand it." Carlyle smiled at her, at the child, at all of them. "There will be a letter, Esme. In 11 years or thereabouts, there will be a letter and we will have to decide. I do not want the first time we read about his world to be the day somebody knocks on our door." "Then we will study," Esme said. "Yes, with him, always with him." The baby yawned, a big luxurious yawn, and looked up at Esme with his green considering eyes, and decided a second time, for the record, that she would do. He put his head against her shoulder and went back to sleep. Rosalie Hale, who had never wanted anything she could not have, watched them from the arm of the couch, and knew she had just been given a thing she had never dared to want. She did not make a sound. She did not move. She sat with her hands in her lap, and after a minute, very carefully, she reached out and touched one of the baby's small fingers with the back of her own, as if testing to make sure he was real. He was. "Hi," she said to him in a voice none of them had heard before. "Hi, Harry, I'm Rose." "You're going to be all right." Outside, the snow quieted and the cedars leaned in. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Among vampires, Harry's first word was Rose, his second word was Ka, which Carlisle chose to count as Carlisle, and his third was No, because he was, after all, a toddler. By the time he had a full vocabulary, he had stopped being surprised that his mother's skin felt like marble in summer, and he had stopped asking his father why he never ate at the table. A child raised among vampires takes his family's strangeness as he finds it. He did not know any different. The Cullens, for their part, worked very hard so that his different would be an ordinary different. The house moved twice in his first 4 years. The first move was a matter of practicality. The old place sat too close to the Hoe Road, and a human child made noise that a human road heard. The new place was a long glass and cedar thing at the end of a 2-mile switchback, half swallowed by rhododendron, with a creek at the bottom of the drive and a stand of Sitka spruce that Emmett declared structural. It had 8 bedrooms, 2 of which were for Harry, 1 for sleeping and 1, Esme explained, for everything else. The second move was a matter of Alice, who walked into the breakfast room one morning, set a cup of milk in front of Harry, kissed him on the forehead, and told Carlisle, "Put the house on the market, love, we need to go north," in a voice that meant yes, right now, yes, I saw something, please don't ask, trust me. Carlisle trusted her. 3 weeks later, they were in a cabin an hour and a half deeper into the rainforest, and 3 days after that, in the paper, there was a small account of a hiker disappearance on the old Hoe Road that none of them said anything about in front of Harry, but that Edward read twice. Alice. Carlisle said quietly in the study after Harry was asleep. "I know," Alice said, "that would have been our house. I know, how close. Very, thank you, don't." She went and sat next to Jasper on the window seat and put her head on his shoulder and did not say anything else. Jasper put his hand on hers without looking up from his book. The cabin creaked softly the way that cabins do, and somewhere in the back of the house, Rosalie, who did not need to sleep, sat on the floor outside Harry's room with her knees drawn up, because that night, just in case, she did not intend to be more than 10 feet from him. She was not more than 10 feet from him for most of Harry's childhood. The magic declared itself early. A child whose mother had thrown every protection she owned into the weave of his shawl does not wait patiently to discover what he is. He was 18 months old when he summoned his own bottle across the kitchen because Esme had set it out of reach in order to answer the phone. He was 2.5 when he turned the bathwater into pink, because Rose had told him pink was her favorite color and he wanted to please her. He was 3 when he made a mobile of wooden ducks hover over his crib on a night he would not settle, and 4 when Edward walked into the den and found him sitting cross-legged in the middle of a slow ring of floating crayons, chewing thoughtfully on a 5th. Carlisle. Edward said in the careful voice he used for things that required his father. Yes, Carlisle came to the doorway. He looked at the ring of crayons. He looked at Harry. He smiled because he could not help it, a smile that had a century of patience and 2 decades of faint astonishment in it. "Good afternoon, Harry." "Hi," said Harry through the crayon. "Could you put them down, please?" Harry thought about it for a long second. Then he uncurled one small fist and the crayons came down neatly, 7 of them in a fan around his knee. He looked up at Carlisle like a scientist presenting an experiment for approval. "Well done," Carlisle said gravely. Harry pulled the crayon out of his mouth and grinned. His teeth were small and even and extremely human. The grin, Carlisle often thought later, should have come with an instruction manual. He started reading to Harry after that. Not fairy tales, not only. He read to him out of the Volturi book, out of a battered copy of Bathilda Bagshot that he had gotten through a London rare book dealer who thought he was buying for a university library. Out of a cracked grimoire he had found in a Portland estate sale and recognized for what it was, the way a cardiologist recognizes a murmur. He did not read to make Harry understand. He read to make Harry comfortable with the shape of the words. Magic, history, houses, wars. Children of 5 do not remember lectures. Children of 5 remember the voice. "Daddy," Harry said, "what's a Hogwarts?" "A place where children like you go to school." "I don't want to. You don't have to decide yet. Okay." He put his head on Carlisle's chest and fell asleep with his fist in the collar of Carlisle's shirt and his cheek against a heart that did not beat. Carlyle did not turn the page for half an hour. He did not need to. Edward, who could not hear him, grew protective of him in a way none of the others entirely understood. "He's very quiet in there," Edward said once in front of a fire that Harry had that morning, lit for the first time by pointing at the logs. Harry was asleep on the rug. He had exhausted himself being 4. "I used to hate it. Do you remember, the first weeks I thought something was wrong with him?" "And now?" Esme asked. "Now it's the only place I can rest," Edward said. He taught Harry piano when Harry was 5. The boy was terrible at it in a cheerful, enthusiastic, genuinely musically curious way. Edward could not read the back of his mind, which meant he could not anticipate his fingering, which meant, for the first time since he had been human, that Edward had to sit next to somebody and teach them slowly. He discovered, to his private surprise, that he liked it. He was patient with Harry in a way he was not patient with anybody else. He played duets with him in the long winter evenings, and Harry laughed, and sometimes, when Harry fell asleep on the bench beside him, Edward let him stay there and played on very softly over his head. Emmett did most of the playing. Emmett was an enormous vampire with the heart of a 7-year-old and the impulse control of a 6-year-old, and he adored Harry with the cheerful, competitive adoration of a big brother. He taught Harry to climb trees. He taught Harry to catch. He taught Harry to fall in a way that did not break anything, which turned out to be, with a magical child who sometimes forgot he was a physical one, a very useful skill. He taught Harry to pick his battles, and then he taught Harry with great seriousness to win them. Uncle M. Harry said once, panting, with grass down the back of his shirt and a knee skinned, "You are very big." "Yes, I'm very small." "Yes, how do I win?" "You don't win against big things with bigness, Harry. You win with smarts. You win with patience. You win by letting big things be tired." "Come here." Emmett crouched down and put out his wrist. "Grab my wrist. No, both hands. Now, what is my weak spot?" "Your thumb." "That's right, kid. I got no thumb power. I got biceps for the world, but the human thumb is a great tool, and you've got 2 of them and I've got none. Twist now." "That's right. Now you're free. Now you run." "Where do I run?" "Anywhere I can't follow," Harry considered. "Aunt Rose's bathroom. She'd flay me." "Good choice." Emmett ruffled his hair. Rosalie, who was watching from the porch rail with her arms folded, permitted herself a small smile. Emmett caught it and winked at her, and she did not stop smiling. It was Rose who gave him his discipline. She did not mean to. She meant to spoil him. She spent more money on him, per his first 5 years, than the household spent on everything else combined. And she did it with the cheerful, obstinate wastefulness of a woman who had been denied motherhood once and did not intend to be denied the next best thing. But spoiling had its limits, and Rosalie had, beneath the glamour, the iron of somebody who had been a human woman brought up by a stern mother in a hard time, and she did not accept rudeness, laziness, or sloppy honesty. Harry at 5 was sloppy about honesty exactly once. He told her he had not broken the pearl comb on her vanity when he had, and she did not raise her voice. She sat him down on the end of her bed and told him the difference between breaking a comb, which could be fixed, and breaking a trust, which could not. He cried so hard he got the hiccups. She cried too, in her way, dry-eyed and furious at herself, and then they made up. And for the rest of his life, Harry Cullen Potter would be incapable of telling a liar he believed the lie, because the first liar he had been caught being had been himself. And Rose had never let him pretend otherwise. "He's going to be a terror at cards," Jasper said later to nobody. "He's going to be incorruptible," Alice said. "Same thing," Jasper said, and went back to his book. Jasper's contribution was different. Jasper taught him to listen to the room. Harry, who was frightened. Harry looked around the kitchen. He was 6. It was a Sunday morning in fall, and there had been a knock at the door 20 minutes ago, a man with a clipboard who had gone away again, and the family was in various arrangements around the house now, pretending to be what they were not. Because Alice had not seen the clipboard man coming and this had bothered them. "Auntie Alice," Harry said. "Why is she frightened?" "Because she didn't see the man." "Very good. Who else?" "Uncle Edward." "Why?" "Because he could hear the man's head and he thinks he's going to come back." "Excellent. Who isn't frightened?" Harry scrunched his nose, thinking. "Uncle M isn't frightened. He's excited." "Correct. And what about me, Harry?" Harry regarded him seriously. You're frightened too, Uncle Jazz, you just don't want us to feel it. Jasper, who had not in 100 years been taught that his grief was visible to a small human with green eyes, took a long, steady breath and said, Yes, Harry, that's right. You listen very well. I'm a good listener, Harry said with the grave confidence of the very young. You are. Can I have waffles? Yes. The nomads came in the spring Harry was 7. Alice saw them 2 days ahead, which was time enough. She came out of a standing pantry stock-taking with her eyes turned inward and said, very crisply, 3 of them, male, male, female, red eyes coming through the hoe. They're not looking for us, they're thirsty, they will find us if the wind shifts. Carlyle did not ask her to be sure. He had not in 50 years asked her to be sure. He looked at Esme. Cabin, Esme said. Yes, Harry, yes. Jasper was already on his feet. Emmett was grinning in a way that had less to do with joy than with readiness. Rosalie had, without discussion, moved 2 steps closer to Harry, and Edward had taken the kitchen window at an angle from which he could see the tree line. Sweetheart, Esme said, crouching down in front of Harry. Do you remember what we practiced? Yes, tell me. Harry's voice was very small and very clear. I go to the cabin, I shut the door, I draw the circle, I sit in the middle, I don't come out until you or Daddy or Rose or Uncle M come to get me. If somebody else comes, I stay in the circle and I. He stopped, and you? And I let the circle go very, very small. That's right, you've practiced. Do you remember how it feels? Harry nodded. His hands had already started to glow a little, the way they did when he concentrated. Carlyle watched the glow and thought, with a flash of paternal fear that was all the sharper for being impossible for him to show, how very much he had to teach this child and how quickly. The nomads broke through the tree line 27 minutes later. The discussion was not a long one. The male doing most of the talking was called Laurent, and he was a diplomat. The male walking at his shoulder was called James, and he was a hunter. The female was a redhead called Victoria, and she walked the way a house cat walks into a new room. Laurent, who had heard of the Olympic coven, made his apologies. He had not known they were in residence. They had come for sport. It was not his fault, but he would make it right. They would go north at once. James looked at Carlyle and then, with a small private twitch, at the cabin across the field. I smell a human, he said. Carlyle did not move. Jasper did not move. Emmett, who had been waiting for this part, moved a half-step forward. You smell a ward, Carlyle said. And a member of our family. The 2 of them go together. You will excuse us while we give you directions to the pass. Will I, said James. Emmett cracked the knuckle of his left thumb. It was an old, theatrical habit. It made a sound like a pebble dropped into a glass. James looked at him and after a moment smiled the thin, small smile of a man deciding to lose this one. Laurent, James said without looking away. Directions? North, said Carlyle, and keep going. They went. Jasper did not relax his posture for another hour. Rosalie did not leave the cabin doorway for 2. When at last she opened the cabin door, Harry was sitting exactly where Esme had told him to sit, inside a ring of blue light, so pale it was almost white, which guttered as he looked up at her and went out. He had held the circle for almost 90 minutes. His mouth was dry and his hands shook a little, and when she knelt down and opened her arms, he stood up and walked into them at an ordinary pace, the way a small boy walks into his mother's arms when he has been very brave for a long time. Good boy, Rosalie said into his hair. Good boy. I'm thirsty, said Harry. Of course you are. She carried him back to the house. Carlyle watched them come across the grass and thought, not for the first time and not for the last, that there were magics older than any wand. We need a tutor, Edward said that night. Yes, Carlyle said. Not a school, not yet. No, a person, a quiet person. Somebody who will teach him discipline and theory and control and not care who he is. Yes, I know where to look. I thought you would. They looked at each other across the study. The lamp on the desk, which Esme had lit for effect, guttered a little in a draught that was not moving. Upstairs, Rosalie was reading Harry to sleep in a voice that was, for Rosalie, astonishingly soft. Alice was humming. Emmett was pretending to watch television. Jasper was pretending to read. They were, all of them, pretending very hard that this night had been an ordinary night, because they had decided, without discussion, that Harry would grow up in a family where the ordinary had been fought for. Carlyle. Edward said, "Yes, he's going to be all right. I know, we are going to be all right too." "Yes, Edward, I think we will." Carlyle set his hand on the grimoire on the desk, and for the first time in a century of reading it, he did not read it as a curiosity, he read it as a manual. On the next page in Latin that he read fluently were the words, "Of the child born of protection, who will grow to turn protection into a sword." He did not tell Alice about that part. He suspected she had already seen it. Outside it began, very softly, to snow. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. The wolves and the witch Isolde Marchetta arrived in a rental car that did not belong in that country. It was the kind of car a Roman woman had flown the agency's Seattle office about, badgering them in the flat, precise English of somebody whose native tongue was better constructed. "You said a manual transmission, and the keys I have been given are for an automatic. No, do not apologize. Change the car." Carlyle had heard about it from the local agency the week before and had liked her at once. He liked people who refused small indignities. She stepped out of the new car onto the Cullen drive wearing a black wool coat, a green scarf, and boots that had been handmade in 1943. She did not look at the house. She looked past the house into the trees, and her mouth went briefly thin. "Lay line," she said in approval. "We know," Esme said, because it was the right thing to say to a guest who opened with a compliment to your foundations. "You're just off it by 30 feet. "We moved the porch." "You moved the porch." "Yes. You are not the usual clients, Mrs. Cullen." "We hope not." Isolde Marchetta was in her late 60s by her own accounting and in her early hundreds by Carlyle's. She had been a student at Beauxbatons in what she insisted was a long time ago. She had been a researcher at Durmstrang and then a defector from Durmstrang, at which point she had been a teacher of private magical children in 4 countries before she had, by her own phrase, settled in Oregon to grow pears. She had a face that had been beautiful and was now interesting. Her magic, which Harry felt before he saw her, moved around her like an owl moves around a branch, patient, observant, capable of astonishing violence at very short notice. She stood on the porch and looked at Harry, who was 8. Harry looked back at her with the frank curiosity of a child who had grown up knowing that strangers were, as a rule, an event. "Buongiorno, bambino." "Buongiorno, signora," said Harry, because Carlyle had taught him a little Italian. "My chiamo, Harry." "Yes," said Isolde, "I know." She put her hand out, palm down. Harry put his palm up under hers. She did not touch him. She held her hand in the air above his and closed her eyes. A minute passed. The porch was very quiet. Rosalie, who had not yet decided if she liked this woman, watched from the doorway with her arms folded across her chest in a posture that might have suggested, to a very perceptive observer, that she was prepared to remove Isolde from the porch and from the continent. Isolde opened her eyes and smiled. "Not bad," she said, "not bad." Esme said, "Signora Cullen, your son has been raised by creatures whose nature is to resist magic, and he is flowering anyway like a vine on a stone wall. He is not bad, he is a pain I have come to teach. I say not bad because I do not wish to make him proud. Pride is the enemy. Hunger is the friend. Are you hungry, bambino?" "Always," said Harry. "Benny," said Isolde, "we will begin." She began that afternoon, and she did not stop for nearly 3 years. Isolde took him through theory first. He did not touch a wand for 6 months. He read, she brought books, from Italian, from Latin, from Old English, and she drilled him with the obsessive patience of an old scholar who had, at some point in her life, been a soldier. She taught him the laws of transfiguration, which she said most English teachers taught as recipe and she taught as logic. She taught him the mathematics of runes, which she said most people tried to memorize and she taught as spelling. She taught him the difference between the intention of a spell and its wording, which, she said, severely, was the difference between a scholar and a parlor trick. She taught him occlumency, because occlumency was what had kept his head private from Edward since infancy, and she wanted him to know what he was doing before he did it less. "Your mind has a wall, bambino. Good, now we will make the wall have doors. Doors we can lock. Why not just leave the wall? Because one day a very clever knife will find that the wall has no hinges, and a door with a lock will laugh at a very clever knife. Attenzione, si, signora." She taught him occlumency with flashcards of images, a scarlet bird, a green field, a long hand, and she drilled him with the patience of a woman who had once taught Madame Maxime's youngest niece. When, after a year, she told him he could close and open the doors at will and that he had a working 3-door memory palace, he had been 9 years old, and he had known without being told that he had done something most adults could not. She took him to Italy in his 9th year to a wandmaker on a back street in Ravenna, a small woman named Olga who smelled of olive wood and tea, and Olga sat Harry in her shop for 3 hours and let him touch her stock. None of the wands were quite right. Olga was pleased about this. She said in Italian that it meant the boy was waiting for something, and that the something was not hers to give. And she put a piece of holly and a loose phoenix feather in a little envelope, pressed it into Harry's hand, and told Isolde that when the time came Harry should take it to the old Englishman and demand that he put them together with his own hands, because the old Englishman would want very much to be the one to do it. She also gave Harry a second thing, which she did not put into a wand, and which was a small twist of birch wrapped around a chip of unicorn bone that she told him, very seriously, to keep in his pocket and not to speak of to anybody. For when you need a second voice, she said. Harry, who was 9 and trusted old women with shop smells, kept it in his pocket. Jacob Black, at 9, was 18 months younger than Harry, which, among children, is a lot. He was, in practical terms, half a foot shorter, a stone lighter, and entirely devoted to whatever game they could invent out of driftwood. Harry met him in the canned goods aisle of Newton's Sporting Goods in Forks on a Saturday morning. Harry was there with Esme, looking for some kind of camping lantern Carlyle had asked about, and Jacob was there with his father Billy, looking for a new fishing reel. And Billy recognized the Cullens before Esme had finished the sentence. He came up the aisle in his chair and he said, "Mrs. Cullen," with the careful neutrality of a man who had not expected to speak to her that day. "Mr. Black," Esme said just as carefully, "this is my Jacob, this is our Harry." The two boys looked at each other across the shelf of lantern batteries with the open, undisguised interest of children. Billy's face, watchful, skeptical, did something Esme did not miss, a kind of softening. He had heard, she realized then, that the Cullens had a child. He had probably heard it for years. He had not believed it, or he had not let himself believe it, until he watched his son and hers eye each other like two puppies deciding whose tail to chase first. "You got a bike, Jacob?" Harry said. "Yeah," Jacob said. "You want a race?" "Maybe," said Jacob. "Not today," said Esme, not raising her voice. "Not today," Billy agreed at the same instant in the same tone. They looked at each other over the shelf. They were not friends, they might not be friends, but they had both in one breath become parents who said the same words. "Another day." Harry said, "Sure," Jacob said. They nodded at each other solemnly and let the grown-ups sort it out later on the porch at home. Esme said, "Carlyle, the Quilute boy, met him today, I heard. Do we need to move?" "No." Carlyle looked out at the darkening yard. "No, I think this is all right. They've known about us for decades. It is not the knowledge that is a problem, it is the surprise. They have not been surprised today. We have let them see the boy clearly in a grocery aisle from a respectful distance. That is how things remain steady. I will write to Billy. We will arrange the boys to meet in a place which is neither theirs nor ours. A cafe, a park, a river. I am not going to forbid it. Rose won't like it. Rose will not like anything for the next 40 years. I suggest we proceed anyway." Esme laughed and put her head on his shoulder and watched the sky lose the last of its light. Harry was 10 and a half when the wax-sealed envelope found the house. It did not come in the post. It came in the mouth of a barn owl that banked across the drive in the gray noon of a Tuesday, scattered a half-dozen Steller's jays, and dropped to the porch rail as if it had been coming to that rail all its life. Jasper, who was cleaning a rifle on the porch that he did not need to clean because he was not going to use it, and that he cleaned anyway because it calmed him, did not move. He looked at the owl. The owl looked at Jasper. Jasper, with slow care, put the rifle down. "Alice," Jasper said. "I know." Alice called from inside. "I saw it yesterday. He's on the trampoline." The owl, which had bright yellow eyes and a disapproving posture, stepped off the rail onto Jasper's offered forearm. It extended one leg. Jasper took the envelope. The wax seal, a lion, a snake, a badger, and an eagle, was as heavy and ugly as a car emblem. And Jasper knew, without reading a word, that they were at last at the thing they had been promising each other, they had been preparing for since Harry was 9 pounds and asleep on Esme's chest. Harry came off the trampoline out of breath and grinning. He saw the owl, his face smoothed. He looked at Jasper. Jasper handed him the letter. "Uncle Jazz, you open it, son." "Right," he did. "Mr. H. Cullen Potter, the loft bedroom, the Cedar House, Forks, Washington, United States of America. We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." Harry read it twice in the quiet way he did things that were larger than he had expected, and he looked up, and Jasper watched a very small number of very large decisions pass across an 11-year-old's face in about 4 seconds. "Uncle Jazz, yes. I don't have to go, no, but I could go." "Yes, I'd like to tell Mum and Dad before I decide. That is a good plan." Harry handed him the letter back and ran for the house. Jasper watched him go. Then he looked at the owl, who watched him back, and Jasper, very solemnly, dug in his pocket and came out with a sausage from Esme's fridge that he had, for reasons he could not have named, put in his coat at breakfast. He offered it to the owl. The owl took it. The owl was polite about it. "Go tell them we are coming," Jasper said to the owl, "and tell them not to send a Hagrid. We have," he added with a smile that had in it the thinnest edge of something that had been a Confederate cavalryman a long time ago, "our own arrangements." The owl, eating, watched him. Then it took off on a hard wing beat and was gone. Minerva McGonagall came herself, 4 days later, through a method the Cullens did not entirely follow, and that Alice had seen 27 hours ahead. She appeared at the end of the drive, did not walk up the drive, did not drive up the drive, simply occupied the end of the drive. With her traveling cloak neat across her shoulders and her hat firmly on her head. And she looked at the house for a long moment with the professional eye of a woman who had come expecting to find a neglected broom closet child, and had come instead to an architect's cedar pavilion with rhododendron at the eaves and a tasteful wind chime on the porch. Her jaw worked. "Professor McGonagall," Carlyle said, walking down the drive to meet her. He did not move too fast. He did not move with the sleek underwater speed that gave his family away. He moved like a country doctor, which was one of the things he still was. "We are pleased you came in person. We had hoped you would. Dr. Cullen?" "I prefer Carlyle if you don't mind." "I do mind a little," Minerva said, and permitted herself the first of a number of extremely small smiles she would permit herself over the afternoon. "But Carlyle, then. Yes. Come up. Esme's made tea, although I should warn you that she has been experimenting lately and the results have not uniformly been pleasant." "I am a Scotswoman, Carlyle. Then you will manage." She came up. She sat on the couch. She let Esme hand her a cup of something that turned out to be a perfectly respectable assam, and she let Harry walk in and sit opposite her on the ottoman, and she looked at Harry, a tall, lean, dark-haired boy with his mother's eyes, and Minerva McGonagall, who had not cried in a schoolroom in 40 years and had not cried outside of one in 15, did not cry because she was Minerva McGonagall, but she took a long, careful sip of her tea and she set the cup down and she said with a slight rasp, "Lily Evans's boy." "Yes," Harry said. "You know her name. Daddy gave me her letters last year." "He did," said McGonagall. "Did he?" She looked at Carlyle with a new and very sharp respect. "He did. I wanted him to know who she was before he knew who she was to the world," Carlyle said. That, McGonagall said, was the right order. She reached into a pocket and brought out a second envelope, which was not, Harry noted, a student's letter. It was heavier, creamier, and the wax had a private sigil instead of the school's. She set it on the coffee table. "I was told by my headmaster to hand-deliver this." I was not told what was inside. I was also not told the child had been missing for 11 years. I was told he was with relatives. I have been, in the last 3 days, unpicking a number of threads, and I find them unsatisfactory. Minerva, a moment, Carlyle. She looked at Harry. "Young Mr. Cullen Potter, your mother was the finest student I ever taught. I would like you to know that. Whatever else happens in this room this afternoon, and whatever else happens in your life, Your mother would have liked your family very much, and she would have been very proud of you." "Thank you, Professor," Harry said, with a calm that came from 8 years of a redhead aunt teaching him how not to be embarrassed by kindness. "You're welcome." She drew breath. "Now, I expect Albus within the hour. He will be subtle, kind, and very difficult," Carlyle said. "You have met him, then?" "No, I have read him," Carlyle smiled gently. "And I have been a physician for some time. I know how to be subtle, kind, and difficult." "I hope so," said McGonagall, "because here he comes." She did not say it as a figure of speech. There was, on the drive, without announcement, a second figure in an immaculate violet robe, his beard white, his hands folded in front of him, walking up toward the porch at the unhurried pace of a man who knew the porch would still be there when he arrived. Alice, who had been on the stairs, came down the stairs then, put her hand on Jasper's forearm and said, so only the family could hear, "Be careful with him. He's stronger than us all. He's also tired." "Is he dangerous?" Edward asked. "Not today. If we make him be, yes. Good to know." Edward said and stood up, and came out to the porch with the rest of them to meet the headmaster of Hogwarts. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. Negotiation with the headmaster. Albus Dumbledore took tea with a family of vampires on a Tuesday afternoon in a glass and cedar house at the end of a 2-mile drive in the state of Washington, and for 30 of the first 31 minutes of the conversation, he looked like a man who was studying a rare specimen. For the 32nd minute, he looked like a man who had realized belatedly that the specimen was studying him back. "This is an excellent cup of tea," he said at the end of the 32nd minute. "Lapsang Souchong," Esme said. "I keep forgetting who it's for. You had not expected to serve it this afternoon." "I had not expected to serve anybody this afternoon, Professor. Albus, please." "Albus, then." Esme smiled at him over the rim of her cup. She did not drink from it. She never drank from anything. She held it because it was polite to hold a cup with a guest. He set his own cup down and folded his hands. He looked at Harry, who was sitting on the ottoman with his knees together and his hands folded, and a patience about him that the oldest wizard in the room had, without a word's warning, noticed was very great. Harry looked back at him quite frankly. "Young man," Dumbledore said, "Sir. It is a very curious feeling to find you." "I thought you would think so." A small flicker. The corners of Dumbledore's eyes caught very briefly on the phrase. He had expected, Carlyle could see, a child who would not yet have the shape of sentences like that. "You have been told a great deal, then?" "Some," Harry said. "By Mum." He did not specify which one, and he watched the word sit in the center of the room. Dumbledore, to his credit, did not flinch. "And by Dad, and by Rose, and by my tutor. She's Italian. She came last year. I've read about you, sir." "Have you? Some? What have you read?" "A book by someone called Rita Skeeter that Dad said was mostly false, and a book by someone called Griselda Marchbanks that Dad said was mostly true, and my mother's letters. Not all of them yet." "Not all of them." Dumbledore repeated very quietly, and for a fraction of a second the old man's face looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. "Yes, I see, yes." He turned to Carlyle. "I should like to speak with you, Doctor, and with your wife in a more private setting, if we may." "You may speak with my family," Carlyle said, "in this one. Please understand, Albus, we do not keep things from each other. We have never had to. Harry in particular we do not keep things from. He has earned the right to sit in the room where his life is discussed. If you would like privacy, we can arrange for a room where the door is closed, but you will not have a room where the words are hidden from him." "Carlyle, Minerva, forgive me, I am being direct because I do not wish to waste Albus's time with evasion. You are being—" Dumbledore said with the first real warmth in his voice, "Lily Evans's son's father. Yes, all right, Carlyle, I shall speak candidly. I have come to take young Harry to Britain. I would have preferred to have done so earlier, and the circumstances of his upbringing, which I have in the last 3 days begun to understand, were not what I had arranged. His mother's magic, I believe, redirected him past my arrangement. I do not entirely know how. I do not entirely know where it has placed him. I do know now who found him, and I must tell you plainly that I am not comfortable with the placement. It is not that I doubt your love, it is that I know what you are. A wizarding child raised among—" He stopped, choosing his word. Among an order of beings traditionally hostile to wand-carrying blood, it is unheard of. It is, frankly, alarming. It also, he lifted one hand. It also appears to have produced an extraordinarily composed young man. I would be a fool to pretend it had not. I would also be a fool, Carlyle, to leave things as they are. Albus, Alice said from the stairs. Yes, Miss Cullen, Alice Cullen, I'd like to show you something if you don't mind. I do not mind. She came down. She did not sit. She came to stand beside Dumbledore's chair, and she said without preamble, Give me your hand, please. And she offered hers. Dumbledore, who had seen many things in a long life, who had walked into Nurmengard once with a smile and left it with a body, looked up at a young woman with short dark hair and an unnervingly calm face. He lifted his hand and put it in hers. Alice closed her eyes. She did not, so far as the Cullens knew, have a useful telepathic gift. Her gift was vision. But she did have the ability, through concentration and touch, to show, sometimes, the shape of a vision. She had practiced it for a decade. She did it now. Dumbledore's face moved through several expressions very quickly. He saw something, Carlyle could tell. Minerva at his shoulder could see it happening too. Dumbledore's hand tightened on Alice's for a fraction of a second. Then he opened his eyes. Miss Cullen. He said in a voice that was for the first time that afternoon uneven. Yes, that is what happens if you take him from us. Yes, it ends in fire. Yes, it's not only him I can see all the paths from his life. Some of them are fires, Albus, that one is the biggest. Don't do it. I'm not threatening you, I'm showing you I want very much for you to see it. I saw it, Miss Cullen. Thank you. Alice let go of his hand and went to Jasper and leaned against him. Jasper did not move. He was a careful man. Nobody in the room spoke for a minute. Carlyle, Dumbledore said. Yes. I would like to propose a compromise. I would like to hear it. Dumbledore tented his fingers. He attends Hogwarts. Yes, Harry said. Everybody in the room looked at Harry. He met their looks one at a time and shrugged. I want to go, he said reasonably. I want to meet them. I want to learn what I am. I want to see where she went to school. I also want to come home to you for Christmas and Easter and summer, and I want one of you to come over there with me when you can, and I want my owl, and I want my books, and I want to sleep in my own bed when I'm home. That's what I want. That is, Dumbledore said, with a very slight bow of his head, remarkably close to what I was going to propose, Mr. Cullen Potter. Then we can get on with it, sir, can't we? Minerva, who had been drinking her tea as a prop, hid her face in the cup and failed to hide a smile. There are practical obstacles, Dumbledore said, recovering his ground with grace. Your family will find it difficult to visit you at Hogwarts. The school has, you understand, wards against our kind of your kind. Against our kind of their kind, Carlyle said dryly. Precisely. We are a wizarding school. There are legal and magical frameworks in place to prevent vampires entering, both to protect students and to honor centuries of agreements. I cannot unmake that in an afternoon. What I can do is this. I can grant one of your family a seasonal warding pass renewed year by year, not a full lift. The person selected must be vetted, registered with the ministry, and bound to certain behaviors. The obvious candidate, he looked at Carlyle, is yourself. You are a healer. You are on the rolls of human hospitals. You have testimonials from physicians going back to the 18th century. If you are willing to be the one we register, I believe I can satisfy the ministry. I am willing. Good, Dumbledore nodded. Second matter, I ask that you accept, for Harry's first year, the presence of a guardian among the staff. She is already there, in fact. He glanced at Minerva. Minerva has agreed in principle, should we come to agreement. I would ask that she be Harry's specific faculty contact. Anything that concerns him, any complaint, any concern, any news, any matter large or small, runs through her. If you find her inadequate for any reason, we will renegotiate. I expect you will not. I have worked with Minerva for 43 years, and I can tell you plainly that there is no better ally for the ward of a complicated family than a Scotswoman who has decided to like you. I have decided, said McGonagall, to like them. Thank you, Minerva. Esme said quietly, and Esme's thank you carried. Third matter, Dumbledore said. I must ask, and I ask it as a favor, not as a condition, that I be permitted from time to time to speak with Harry directly, not alone unless he wishes, not in confidence that the family does not approve of. There are things about his mother, about his father, about the world he was born into and the night on which he nearly died, that I think a boy should hear from a man who was there." "Sir," Harry said, "I'd like that." "Then we have it. We have most of it," Carlyle said. "One more matter, Albus, and then I believe we are in agreement. We are not going to pretend that Harry is an ordinary wizarding boy. We will not hide his upbringing. We will not hide our family. If there is a Hogwarts welcome feast, the Cullens will not be seated at it, we understand, but we will not be hidden from the newspaper either. Harry goes to Hogwarts as Harry Cullen Potter. Our name is first. Our name is where he comes home to." "That is," Dumbledore paused. "That is a public declaration, Carlyle. It will cost him, I suspect, some of his anonymity." "He has never had anonymity. He has only had safety, and we have given him that. A name will not harm a child whose family is not ashamed of him." Dumbledore looked at Carlyle for a long second. Then he nodded once slowly. "Agreed. Then we are in agreement." Dumbledore rose. He did not seem to hurry, and yet a half-second later he was already at the coffee table with his teacup in hand. He set the cup down politely. "Mr. Cullen Potter." "Sir." "I expect to see you on the 1st of September." "Yes, sir." "Minerva will be by in a fortnight to take you to Diagon Alley for supplies." He looked at Carlyle. "And you, I trust, will come as well?" "I will." "Good." He offered Carlyle his hand. Carlyle took it. Dumbledore's grip was dry and unhurried and, to Carlyle's infinite fascination, warmer than a human's. There was something about Dumbledore's body that ran hotter than it should have. He filed it away. They both did. Each of them noticed each other noticing, and they permitted themselves a half-smile about it. "Be well, Carlyle. Be well, Albus." He went down the drive the way he had come up it. By the time they lost sight of him around the bend, he was already not there. Minerva stayed. She had another cup of tea. She told Harry stories about his mother, not the ones about her brilliance or her bravery, but the ones about her laughter, that she had laughed, at 17, in a way that made an entire common room come alive. Harry listened with the complete, unblinking attention of a child assembling a person from pieces. When Minerva left, Rosalie walked her to the end of the drive herself, and at the gate said quite softly, "Professor." "Yes." "If anything happens to him in that school, I would like you to know that I will come." "I would expect nothing less, Miss Cullen." "Rose." "Rose." Minerva put out her hand, hesitated, then set it on Rosalie's forearm with the firm grip of a woman who did not fear cold things. "He will be in my care." "I do not lose the children who are in my care. I have failed before, and I have not gotten over any of it. You have my word." Rosalie nodded once. She was not a woman who did thank yous to strangers, but she permitted herself one on Harry's behalf. Diagon Alley under glamour was a curious exercise. Alice did the glamour because Alice was better at it than any of them. Carlyle walked up the cobbles with a slightly rounded belly, warmer skin, a thread of gray at his temple, and a pair of wire-rimmed spectacles that were us-olds. He looked, if anybody had asked Harry, like a kindly small-town family doctor from Bellingham. The Leaky Cauldron's bouncer, an old, saw-toothed man with a ward stone around his neck, looked at Carlyle for 3 full seconds, frowned, did not move, and then opened the door because Alice had been very thorough. Harry stepped through on McGonagall's arm. Diagon Alley, the carts, the cries, the carousel of pointed hats and brass cauldrons opened up in front of him, and Harry, who had been prepared for it by a tutor and a grimoire in his mother's letters, permitted himself, for exactly 3 seconds, the frank open wonder of a small boy. Then he composed himself, and Minerva saw him compose himself, and she put her hand briefly on the back of his head. "Oh, my love," she said under her breath, "Gringotts first." The goblin at the counter examined his key, which had been in Esme's jewelry box since a day in 1982 when an owl had dropped it there and flown away without explanation. He examined it again. He tilted it to the light. He made a small throat noise. "Mr. Cullen Potter." "Yes." "Vault 719 has been inert since your ward, young man. You will wish to add your magical signature to the seal. Also, there is a note in your file that at your first visit you are to be given a certain letter. It has been there for 10 years. May I have the letter, please?" "Of course." The goblin, with a slight, approving bow that Harry did not know was unusual, produced from a drawer at his knee a slim envelope that had his name in his mother's hand across the front. He did not open it there. He would not open it there. He put it inside his jacket, over his heart, where Rose had taught him to keep things that could not be lost. And then he rode the Gringotts' cart into the earth with Carlyle and Minerva, and came out again with a pouch of coins and a heart so full it threatened, for a small moment, to crack its acclimental walls. He held. Us old had taught him, wands were the last stop. Ollivander's was narrower and dustier than Harry had expected, the shelves cliffing upward on either side, and Ollivander in the back was smaller than Harry had expected too, a small white-haired man with dusty fingers and very bright eyes. He did not say hello, he said, "Ah." "Good morning, sir," said Harry politely. "Ah," Ollivander said again and came around the counter. Harry reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out Olga's envelope. He offered it without a word. Ollivander took it. He opened it. He looked at the piece of holly. He looked at the phoenix feather. He looked at Harry. His mouth shaped a word that was not any word, and then, for the first time in a very long time, Garrick Ollivander laughed aloud. "Olga," he said, "you old romantic. Yes. Well, Mr. Cullen Potter, we have, it seems, a one to build. Please sit. This will take us perhaps an hour. I should very much like to be the man who does this." It took him 90 minutes. He did it in the back room, with Harry watching at an apprentice's distance. When he was done, the wand that Harry Cullen Potter lifted off the cloth was 11 inches of holly wood, flexible, with the twined single feather of a phoenix, and it sang to him the moment he touched it, sang a note so bright that Carlyle out front flinched without meaning to. Ollivander, looking at him, nodded very slowly. "There is," he said, "a second voice near you, Mr. Cullen Potter. I hear it. I will not ask what it is. You will not tell me. You will carry it carefully, and you will use it only when the first voice has been exhausted. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir." "Good." He rapped the wand, and Harry paid, and they went. On the train home, Harry unfolded the letter from Gringotts on his knee with his parents on either side of him. It said in Lily Evans Potter's hand, "Dearest Harry, if you are reading this, it means I did not survive to see you off to Hogwarts, and the world did not end at Godric's Hollow the way we hoped. I wanted you to know 3 things. First, I loved you more than the world. Second, I did not trust Albus Dumbledore with all of you, and I am sorry if this disappoints you. He is a great man and a good one, and he is also a man who sees the world in long lines, and sometimes he does not see the small thing standing in front of him. Do not be afraid of him. But do not swallow him whole. Third, wherever you have ended up, whoever has you, if they have loved you, they are your family, and they are mine too. Give them my love. Tell your father about James. Tell your mother about my garden. Be good, be brave, be kind. Yours, Mum." Harry folded the letter again. Carlyle was not looking at him. He was staring out the train window at the gray Atlantic of a fogged Washington morning, and he did not move. Esme had put her hand on the back of Harry's neck, and she was not moving either. Harry let himself, very briefly, press his face into her shoulder. He did not cry. He would later. Right now he had to sit with it. On the 1st of September, Carlyle drove him to King's Cross under the same glamour. Rose and Esme and Alice had crossed over 2 days before on a private plane. Jasper stayed behind because the crowds would be too much. Emmett refused to be left behind and was there in a Seahawks hoodie looking, for a vampire, remarkably convincingly like a tourist. They stood in a quiet knot at platform 9¾ and watched Harry's trunk go in. Rose, who had sworn on the way over not to cry, hugged him so hard for so long that the conductor had to cough twice before she let go. Harry looked up at her and he said very steadily, "I'm coming home, Rose." "I know," she said. Christmas. Christmas. Write to me every week." "I will." He hugged Esme. He hugged Carlyle. He hugged Alice, who whispered something in his ear he did not repeat. He shook Emmett's hand, and Emmett picked him up in the same motion and turned him upside down, because Emmett was Emmett. When Harry boarded the train and found a compartment and sat down at the window and looked out, he could see all of them standing together under the enormous arch of the station ceiling, and he put his hand flat to the glass, and they each of them put a hand up. The train started to move. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. The boy who was raised by vampires, Hermione Granger, tried the door of the compartment twice before she committed to it. Harry could see her through the narrow glass, checking whether it was empty. Most of the train had filled by then, and, because Harry liked the look of a girl who did not simply shove open a door because she had noticed it, he got up and opened it himself. "Hi," he said. "Oh, hello, sorry. I'm Hermione Granger. Have you seen a toad? A boy named Neville has lost his." "Not yet. You can come in and look with me if you like." "I can't, thank you. I'm helping Neville. I should. Are you all right?" "Yes," Harry said. "You look like you've been crying." "My family saw me off," he said truthfully. "I have a big one." Hermione Granger, who at 11 was already equipped to detect, at 50 paces, any cousin or sibling with whom she was not going to be friends, looked at him for a moment with her brown, bright, cataloging eyes and liked what she saw. "I'll come back," she said. "If that's all right, please do." She came back 40 minutes later with Neville Longbottom, a round-faced boy with no toad and a grandmother's shawl folded over his arm, and with another boy, a tall redhead with a smudge on his nose, who introduced himself in the precise, shy, valiant manner of a youngest son of 6. As Ron Weasley, they all sat down. Harry, who had been raised by Rosalie Cullen to look at people as they arrived and decide whether he trusted them and then keep the decision to himself, looked at each of them and he thought, "Yes, Harry Cullen Potter," he said. Ron's freckled face did something complicated. "Harry Potter?" he said. "Yes, blimey, you're sorry, that's rude, I'm sorry, it's only my mum talks about you all the time." "It's all right, you said Cullen Potter." "Yes, who are the Cullens?" "My family." "Like all of them?" "Like all of them?" Ron digested this for about 4 seconds and then, to Harry's private relief, said, "Do your family have a Quidditch team?" "No, I was raised in Washington State in America. I've been on a broom since I was 7. My uncle taught me. His name is Emmett." "What position?" "Seeker." "Oh, mate, wait until you see Hogwarts." They were friends after that. Hermione, who had read Harry Potter and the Boy Who Lived and Harry Potter and the 12 Ways We Think Voldemort Attacked that night, and Harry Potter and the 11-pound baby who survived and who had not liked the books very much, did not ask Harry about any of them. She asked him about America, which she had visited once at 10, and she asked him what language he had been taught magical theory in. And when he said Latin and Italian and a little English, she looked, for a moment, impressed. And Harry understood then that impressing Hermione Granger was going to be a long project, and that he was going to enjoy it. Neville asked him about herbology, because Neville was Neville, and Harry, who had spent 3 summers helping Esme in the long greenhouse, gave him an answer about witch hazel and rainforest soils that Neville wrote down on the back of an envelope. Draco Malfoy opened the compartment door with 2 goons at his elbow about an hour past Edinburgh, looked at Ron, looked at Harry, and said, "You're Harry Potter, Cullen Potter?" "I beg your pardon, Cullen Potter. Cullen first." "I just thought I'd mention it, because you look like the kind of person who cares about names." Draco, who did in fact care about names, and was surprised to have it noticed by an American stranger he had planned to dominate the conversation of, hesitated. "Malfoy," he said, after a short second. "Draco, nice to meet you. My father, I'd like to meet him. Would you?" "Sometime, if he's willing. He's got a reputation and I like to meet my reputations." Draco, who had come to the compartment expecting to bully a boy hero and found himself, against his will, in a conversation, looked around the compartment at Ron, whom he was prepared to disdain, and Hermione, whom he was prepared to disdain, and Neville, whom he was prepared to ignore, and he did the arithmetic of a clever child in a new country and decided on dignified withdrawal. "Another time, then, Cullen Potter." He nodded once and left without the expected skirmish, and Ron said, after the door had closed, "Mate, what was that?" "That," Harry said, "was a boy who would like to be friends but has to be taught how. My Aunt Rosalie said they're the hardest kind." "You can tell him no, you don't have to tell him no rudely. Your aunt sounds scary." "She is," said Harry, "you'd like her." The sorting was a gauntlet, and Harry walked into it the way Emmett had taught him to walk into a room with predators in it, which was with his head up, his shoulders loose, and his hands nowhere near his pockets. The great hall roared. He had not, for all his reading, been prepared for how bright it was, or how many candles there were, or how high the ceiling showed the sky. He blinked up at it for 3 seconds. Then he found McGonagall's eye at the head of the line, and she gave him the very, very small smile of a woman who had been watching him since he came in, and he was all right after that. Cullen Potter, Harry. A silence flowered and fell. A few jaws moved. Hermione, already sorted into Gryffindor, had turned in her seat to watch. Harry walked up the steps. McGonagall lowered the hat onto his head, and the hat said in his ear, very politely, "Good evening, Mr. Cullen Potter. Good evening. My, what an interesting head. What an extremely interesting head. You've been trained, young man, yes, and loved, yes. And you've had, forgive me, let me look, very unusual food. I was raised by vampires." The hat was silent for a moment. Then, in a voice that was, Harry could tell, doing its best to contain a very large amount of amusement, it said, "Yes, I see. Well, you have courage, of course, and you have a very well-drilled mind, and you have ambition that rather alarms me, and you have a loyalty so fierce that I could hang a hammock off it. Do you have a preference? I'll do well wherever you put me," said Harry politely. "I know you will." "I know you will. Well then, let us say Gryffindor." The Gryffindor table went up in a noise that Harry had never in his life heard, and he went and sat down, and Ron Weasley, who had not yet been sorted, gaped at him from the line, and Hermione, to his delight, clapped calmly and scooted over to make space. He sat. The feast happened. He ate slowly because Rose had taught him when he was tiny to eat slowly around people who did not eat, and the habit had stayed. Across the hall, at the staff table, Minerva McGonagall caught his eye once and nodded, and that was all he needed. Severus Snape, farther down the staff table, did not nod. Severus Snape was staring at him with a face that Harry, with his old trained eye, read in about 3 seconds. Severus Snape's face was doing something he could not have done in front of anybody who could see him, and he had forgotten, for a breath, to stop it. He was looking at a boy with green eyes and black hair, and the memory of Lily Evans written across the bones, and he was, Harry thought, not unkindly grieving. He looked away from Snape to give him privacy, and when he looked back, Snape had composed his face into the stone it usually was, and the two of them took one another's measure across the long room, and Harry very deliberately inclined his head as a man acknowledges a man. And he saw Snape's eyes narrow a fraction, and he saw, for half a breath, a new assessment happen. The first week was survivable. The second week was good. By the third week, Harry Cullen Potter had become, among the Gryffindors, at least a person. He was not the center of anything he did not want to be. He was instead a quiet gravity around which a small, good group had assembled. Ron, Hermione, Neville. A second year called Angelina Johnson, who had liked the way he stood on a broom at tryouts. The 3 Weasley twins, who had been watching him since the feast, and who had, during week 2, concluded that an American boy raised by vampires was approximately as funny an idea as they could hope to encounter, and were now his friends forever. They had adopted him. Harry, who had never had a brother, found himself with 2 at once and was very pleased about it. Quidditch tryouts, a week and a half in, had not been trials so much as demonstrations. Oliver Wood, the Gryffindor captain, had stood on the pitch with his hands on his hips, watching Harry's first 2 passes around the hoops, and had said, without turning his head, "Angelina." "Yes, get me whatever forms we need. Done." Harry's first match was against Slytherin in October. He caught the snitch in 11 minutes by doing something Wood had spent the preceding 2 weeks trying to convince him not to do, which was flying in a hard, tight circle in the exact center of the pitch so low that the Slytherin beaters could not safely use their bats, until the snitch, driven to distraction by the changing vortex of his wake, flew into his cupped palm. The Gryffindor stand sounded like a building collapsing. Severus Snape, in the staff box, had stared at Harry with an expression nobody else had seen, because Snape had had the foresight to turn his head. Harry saw it. Snape had a slight, bitter, nothing-has-changed smile. Then Snape had looked away. The troll came on Halloween. Harry had not, as it happened, intended to fight a troll. Harry had intended to be with his house in the corridor being herded back to Gryffindor Tower. What he had not known until Parvati Patil came up the line whispering was that Hermione Granger was in the bathroom and did not know. Ron had said something unkind after Charms. Hermione had cried. Hermione had missed the announcement. Ron, I know, I'm coming. They peeled off. Harry had not asked them to. Nobody had asked them to. It did not occur to either of them to do anything else. Hermione was theirs now. The troll had already found her when they got there. Harry, who had spent 7 summers training with a vampire who believed in clean, simple movement, did 3 things in the first 5 seconds of entering the bathroom. He found Hermione crouched behind the broken stall with his eyes. He found the troll, a mountain of slate-colored flesh, with his eyes. He found the distance between them and the distance between the troll and Ron, and he made the calculation. He did not run at the troll. He did not hurl a spell. He raised one hand, the wand arm, and he spoke, in a voice that had 3 summers of us old Marchetta behind it. A single precise cutting charm that made a half-inch deep, 3-foot line across the back of the troll's left knee, and when the troll's leg gave way, Harry stepped forward. Wand still up and said, Hermione, hit the floor, and she hit the floor just as the troll's club came down and hit the sink, and Ron, bless him, had been raised by Arthur and Molly Weasley to be useful in a crisis, and Ron said at the top of his voice, Wingardium Leviosa. And the second club came up off the floor and then down hard on the troll's head. The troll sat down and did not get up. There was a silence in the bathroom broken only by Hermione breathing very fast. Herm, Harry said. Yes, are you hurt? No, get up. Yes, she got up. Harry let her have 3 seconds to straighten the front of her robes, and he let her have 3 seconds to get her face in order, because Rose had taught him that a small dignity at the right moment was worth more than a whole big rescue, and he did not look at her during the 3 seconds. When McGonagall burst in 40 seconds later with Quirrell sprinting behind her, and Snape in a white fury 3 paces back. Hermione Granger was standing up with her face composed, and Harry Cullen Potter was standing beside her with his wand at his side, and Ron Weasley was staring at the troll he had personally brained. Hermione drew breath. Professor, she said, and she did not look at Harry when she said it, but Harry knew at once what she was about to do, and he loved her a little for it. I'm so sorry. I went to look for the troll. I'd read about them in a book, and I thought I could handle it. Ron and Harry came to get me out. If they hadn't, I'm so sorry, Professor. McGonagall looked at her for a long, long second. Her nostrils flared once. Miss Granger. Yes, Professor. 5 points from Gryffindor for a serious lapse of judgment. Mr. Weasley, Mr. Cullen Potter. 5 points each to Gryffindor for sheer dumb luck. I expect not to see this manner of stupidity repeated. She looked at the troll. Severus, if you would. Gladly, said Snape. They walked back to the tower together, the 3 of them, in a silence that was not awkward. At the portrait hole, Hermione stopped, and she said, without turning, Thank you. You'd have done it for me, Harry said. Yes, said Hermione, I would have. She climbed through the portrait, and that, as Rose would later explain to the rest of the family in the kitchen, was the afternoon Hermione Granger joined the Cullen family, whether she knew it yet or not. Letters came every week. Roses were short and practical. I want a photograph of you on your broom. I want a photograph of your dorm. I want a photograph of your cloak. Send me a list of everybody who is unkind to you so that I can write them personally. Love. R. Emmets were long and unreadable. Mate, mate. There is a sport where you ride a broom around a pole and hit a ball with a stick while on the broom. Do you understand me? I need to play. Can I come? Can Alice forge me a wizard license? Esmes were the kind of letters a mother writes who is not a mother by birth, but is a mother by practice, which is to say they were the kind of letters that made Harry, for the 3 minutes he read them, forget he was at a boarding school 4,000 miles from home. Alice's were not strictly letters. They were telegrams of foresight delivered by an owl that had no business being that fast. Don't take the 3rd pastry at lunch on Thursday. Don't say yes to wood on Saturday. Kiss McGonagall's hand when you see her on the 11th. She has had a hard day. He kissed her hand on the 11th. She permitted it with a small, hardened, appalled pleasure, and when he raised his head she said, with the stone face she wore in all her classrooms, "Mr. Cullen Potter, if you do that in a corridor I shall flay you," and he said, "Yes, Professor." And she laughed out loud in her office for the first time in anybody's memory. Carlyle's letters were long, they were fatherly, they asked about his courses, they asked about his friends. They said at the bottom of one, "I have been reading a book." The man Nicholas Flamel appears on page 412. He is alive and living in France. If his name comes up, tell me. Harry, who was 11 and observant, folded the letter carefully and put it in his trunk with his mother's Gringotts letter, and he thought about that line for a long time. Christmas came, he had refused to stay at school. He had refused so completely, so unconditionally, the day McGonagall had asked whether he would, that she had, after an initial, reflexive professorial refusal to argue, laughed her second laugh of the term and said, "Quite right, Mr. Cullen Potter. Go home." He got on the train with Ron, who was also going home, and hugged him at King's Cross, which astonished Ron, and said, "Give your mum my love, I'll write to her if you like." And then, in the Muggle half of the station, he saw them, all of them. Alice first, because Alice had posed herself to be visible. Rose behind her, because Rose could not abide being the first thing anybody saw. Esme beside Alice, her face brighter than the station lights. Carlyle at Esme's shoulder, wearing, of all things, a tweed coat, because he had been told by Alice that he had to be a visible British dad today, and he had taken the instruction thoughtfully. Emmett, enormous, pretending to read a newspaper. Jasper at the back, behind everyone, watching the crowd the way a sheepdog watches a flock. Harry ran. He did not run very fast. He ran like a boy. He ran like a boy who has been away from his family, and he ran into Rose's arms, and Rose picked him up as if he weighed nothing, and she hugged him so hard he could not breathe, and she said into his hair, "I have missed you." And Harry, for the first time that term, let himself cry, not much and not for long but exactly enough, into the shoulder of a woman who did not need to breathe, and who would not, for the next 3 weeks, let him more than 10 feet from her. Carlyle put his hand on the back of his head. Emmett, grinning, picked up his trunk with one hand. Alice said, "Harry, you owe me an inch." "I grew an inch, you grew an inch and a quarter." Alice, "Come on, love, let's go home." Chapter 5, End Chapter 6. The stone and the shadow quirrell had been a shape on the corner of Harry's attention since the welcome feast. He was a stammerer, a turban wearer, a man who smelled, to Harry, whose nose had been trained by 7 years in a house with Jasper in it, of 2 different scents at once, which was impossible for a single human body. Harry had not made anything of it at first. He had assumed the second scent was a perfume or a residue from a classroom experiment or a bit of Quirrell's garlic, a theory Ron enjoyed. But the second scent did not change. It followed the man from the great hall to the 3rd-floor corridor. It was under his robes. It was, Harry decided in the 4th week of term, inside him. "Hermione, does Quirrell ever smell odd to you?" "Everyone smells odd to you, Harry. You have a nose like an Auror's dog." "Yes, but Quirrell, I haven't noticed. What do you smell?" "Old blood," Harry said, frowning. "Not new." "Not his own, somebody else's, and garlic, and the garlic is fresh, and the blood is older than the garlic." Hermione, who did not panic, put down her book. "Harry, yeah, write home. I already have. Good." Carlyle wrote back 4 days later in the careful, lucid handwriting of a physician who did not use more words than he needed. Quirinus Quirrell was in the Hogwarts directory. He had taken a year's sabbatical in Eastern Europe the summer before his post had started. There were records of him in Albania of all places which Carlyle had underlined. He had come back changed. Carlyle attached, as a second letter, a copy of a passage he had found in the Volturi grimoire about a thing called a Horcrux. He did not say the word. He described the thing, a fragment of a soul bound by murder, housed inside an object, or, though rare, though appalling, inside a living host. If you encounter such a host, Carlyle wrote, do not confront it alone. Tell Dumbledore, tell Minerva, do not be brave. Bravery is not what this requires. Alice's note arrived the same day, carried by a second owl. When the mirror happens, you do not want the stone, want him to live, that's all. Harry, read both. He wrote back to both, then he went to Hermione. They did not, to Hermione's initial horror, take it to Dumbledore immediately. Harry had thought about it for half an evening and had concluded, reasonably, that if Dumbledore had wanted to remove Quirrell, he could have done so at any time in the last 4 months, which meant, therefore, that Dumbledore had left him there on purpose. Which meant, therefore, that Dumbledore was either using Quirrell as bait or using the stone as bait, and either way the thing Dumbledore wanted was to see how a particular shadow would move. Which meant, therefore, that any information Harry offered the headmaster would be received with an air of mild surprise and a vague stroking of the beard and would change nothing, because Dumbledore's plan had, Harry suspected, already accounted for him. "So what do we do?" Hermione said. "We assume the stone will be moved to the end of a long corridor at the end of the term, and whoever has been circling it will come at it then, and we arrange to be there with it." "Harry, that's a terrible plan." "I know, it's the one we have." "What about Dumbledore?" "Neville's Gran knows him, doesn't she? She's on the Board of Governors. We sent her a letter through Neville the last week of term saying we're worried about Professor Quirrell and that we think he might try something tonight. Not today. The last night of term, that's our night. The board letter will be noticed in about 6 hours, give or take. Dumbledore will have to move. Whatever he was waiting for, we make it happen on our schedule." Can you do that?" "I can if we do it together." "Oh my God, Herm, I'm in, of course I'm in." "Ron." "Mate, I've been in since October. This is probably going to get me killed, but at least my mum will have a story to cry at Christmas over." The end-of-term night had the perfect shape Harry had wanted it to have. Neville's grandmother's letter, which Hermione had, in fact, drafted a week in advance, arrived at the Hogwarts board at 11 in the morning. The emergency meeting was convened at 3. Dumbledore was summoned to London at 5, which was exactly what Harry had wanted and exactly what Dumbledore had predicted Harry would want. Dumbledore had, in fact, half planned to be summoned to London that evening himself. He had merely been forestalled in the planning by a resourceful 11-year-old and a board member grandmother who was very cross on Neville's behalf. Harry, Ron, and Hermione went through the trapdoor at 10 p.m. The Devil's Snare was easy because Hermione had come equipped with a muttered bluebell fire. The flying keys were easy because Ron had been on a broom since he was 6 and could pick a silver-handled needle out of a hurricane. McGonagall's chess set was hard and took 40 minutes, but Ron was Ron. And by the time the smoke cleared he had, instead of sacrificing himself like a hero in a bad book, maneuvered the White Queen into a corner and checkmated her with a rook that involved Hermione sitting on a Black Knight's shoulder, wearing a helmet that was too big for her. Ron was pleased about that move in particular. He talked about it for years. Snape's potion puzzle was so specifically tailored to the kind of logic shop that Usold had spent 3 summers drilling Harry on that he solved it in 90 seconds. Hermione said admiringly, "Your tutor must be terrifying." Harry said, "You have no idea." He drank. The last room was the mirror room. He went in alone because he had told Ron to wait at the door and because he had told Hermione to get to the owlery and send a bird to Dumbledore the moment he disappeared through the flame wall. They had agreed on that. It was not that he did not want them with him. It was that he wanted someone upstream to raise the alarm if he did not come back, and it was that he wanted someone at the door to fall on Quirrell's neck from behind if Quirrell somehow came in while he was working. Quirrell was already in. He was standing before the mirror of air-eyed, turban-wrapped, shaking with a fury Harry could taste on the air. He turned at Harry's step. He smiled. "Potter, Cullen Potter, please." "Of course." The smile went wider and thinner. Something moved inside Quirrell's head. Harry saw it. He saw, for a half-second, a second pair of eyes open in Quirrell's face before Quirrell remembered to close them. "Of course. Come closer, boy. I want you to look in the mirror." "No, thank you," Harry said politely. Quirrell's eyes narrowed. "Forgive me, I wasn't offering." He raised his wand, and Harry, in a movement that Emmett Cullen had spent an entire summer teaching him because Emmett said, a feeling Harry would need it, dropped straight down to the floor, rolled left, and came up behind a stone pillar before the incarcerus had finished leaving Quirrell's mouth. The ropes tangled air. Quirrell hissed. Harry, behind the pillar, did not shout for Ron. He touched the piece of birch and unicorn bone in his pocket with his left hand, and with his right he held the Holly Phoenix wand steady, and he breathed, the way us old had taught him, and he said loudly from where Quirrell could not see him, "Professor, I do not want to hurt you." "I know you're under a compulsion. Let him go. He is not worth your life." "I am not under a compulsion," hissed another voice from Quirrell's chest. "I am under my lord." "That's the same thing, isn't it? Come out, Potter, and meet me, Cullen Potter." "Yes, fine, Cullen Potter, come out." Harry came out. He came out from behind the pillar because the pillar was no longer the best cover. He had counted Quirrell's breaths, and he had counted the tremor in his hand, and he had noted that Quirrell had already begun to sweat, which was odd in a stone room. He came out standing upright, wand at his side, and he looked past Quirrell's face into the mirror. He saw his family. He always saw his family. This time the family was arrayed around him with their hands on his shoulders, all of them, and at the far edge of the group, where Harry had never before allowed himself to imagine them, stood a woman with red hair and a man with a lopsided grin. And the two of them had a hand on the shoulder of Rosalie Cullen in the same easy way that family members put their hands on one another when they are all at a wedding. Harry, looking at them, felt the weight in his pocket shift. The mirror blinked. The stone appeared in his reflection's pocket. He did not want it. He wanted them. He wanted them alive and together, and he wanted them with him, and he wanted Quirrell to lay down his wand and not die, and he wanted above all to go home. He wanted, he realized, with the enormous calm clarity us old had taught him was the signature of correct desire, to be the person who ended this without a death tonight. The stone slid into his pocket. He felt it. "Give it to me," Quirrell hissed. "Give it, give it." Harry looked at him over the mirror's edge. He smiled, not unkindly. "I can't," he said. "It's already gone." "Liar, find him." Quirrell's hand came at him, and Quirrell's hand, where it closed on the skin of Harry's wrist, began to smoke. It was the strangest thing, Harry would think later. He had read Carlyle's letter about what vampire blood did to wizards, about why, even diluted through the decade-long exposure of a child living in a house with 7 vampires. With venom and with the cold blood of the Cullen family on his bathing towels and in his drinking water and worked into the very strand of his hair, his body had come to carry a signature of their kind. And he had not been sure, before that night, that he had understood his father correctly. He understood now. Quirrell was melting. Where Harry's wrist touched him, the skin blistered. Where Harry's elbow struck him in the scramble, the muscle parted. Quirrell howled, not Quirrell, but the thing inside Quirrell, the older, blacker thing, and he howled for a long second. And in his howl, Harry heard, for the first time, a voice he had been trained to listen for since childhood. And that voice said, in a fury that cracked the very stone of the floor, "Get off him." "Make me," Harry said. The shade boiled out of Quirrell's body. It left him a husk on the floor, not dead, Carlyle would tell him later, but empty of the passenger he had been carrying. The passenger's leave-taking was not gentle. And the shade rose up, a black thing with no face, and it hung for a moment in the air and then streaked through the ceiling. Harry watched it go. He did not chase it. He did not have a spell for it. He had known from Carlyle's letter that it would leave this way and that chasing it was not on his list of tasks tonight. He knelt to Quirrell. He checked his pulse. He said in a voice that was only a little shaky, "Professor, I'm getting the headmaster." "You," Quirrell coughed. "You, I know, I'm sorry." And he was sorry. He had not wanted this. He had wanted Quirrell to be a man who had come to the school because he wanted to teach, and he had wanted Quirrell to be released from the thing that had eaten him, and he had wanted a sort of happy ending for everybody. He did not quite get that ending, but Quirrell lived. He lived badly for 3 weeks in the infirmary, and then he lived, somewhat better, in a long convalescence in a wizarding clinic in Devon. And by the summer he had begun to teach again in a smaller school in a smaller country, and he wrote Harry, years later, a letter thanking him, very formally, for the mercy of his wrist. Harry read it twice and burned it because he did not need a thank you, but that was later. Dumbledore appeared at the end of the corridor a minute after the shade had gone. He had not been in London after all, Harry noted. He had been somewhere very nearby. He came fast. He took in the scene in a single sweep, Harry kneeling, Quirrell unconscious, Ron and Hermione coming up behind him, and he did not say what an ordinary grown-up would have said. He said instead, "Mr. Cullen Potter, the stone." "Here." said Harry, and he lifted it out of his pocket and he put it, ceremonially, in the headmaster's palm. Dumbledore closed his hand on it. I had not wanted to use you like this, he said, and to Harry's surprise his voice had in it a small, real shame. I know, sir. You made it very difficult to use you like this, which I ought, in retrospect, to have predicted. I'm sorry, sir. No, you aren't. No, Harry admitted, I'm not. Dumbledore looked at him for a second. He looked at Quirrell. He looked at the empty air where the shade had been. And then, to Harry's private, astonished and delighted horror, Albus Dumbledore smiled at him. Welcome, Mr. Cullen Potter, he said. To the end of your first year you have, I suspect, become a very inconvenient boy. Yes, sir. I believe we shall have to have a long conversation before you leave for the summer. Yes, sir. Not tonight. Thank you, sir. Tomorrow. Yes, sir. He stood up. His eyes found Ron and Hermione in the doorway and widened a little with pleasure. Miss Granger, Mr. Weasley. I expect nobody ever to speak of this evening again, other than the three of you, Mr. Cullen Potter's family and myself. I should very much like to see your faces at breakfast on the morrow. We will require, I think, a celebration. Yes, sir. Said Hermione with a curtsy that she had not in her life curtsied before and which came to her because she had read when she was 7 that you curtsied to headmasters. Harry found this adorable. Dumbledore, to his credit, inclined his head. They filed out. Harry did not tell anybody what he had seen in the mirror. He did not tell Ron. He did not tell Hermione. He did not tell Dumbledore, who, at breakfast the next morning, asked very gently and did not press. He did not tell later even his mother Esme, until many years afterward on a Christmas Eve in the Glass and Cedar house, when Rosalie was sitting on the arm of the couch and Lily Potter's letter was framed above the mantel. He told Rose, only Rose, that in the mirror of Air-Eyes he had seen his mother put her hand on Rose's shoulder as if they had always been sisters. Rose was not a woman who cried. She did not cry then. But she put her arm around him and put her head against his, and Harry, who was by then nearly a grown man, let his mother hold him for a long time. He brought the stone home in July, figuratively speaking. He brought himself home, which was the important part. The Cullens met him at the airport in Seattle. They drove him back to Forks in a caravan of 3 cars because the whole family could not fit in one. At dinner on the porch, Carlisle said, "There will be another year of this, son, you know that." "Yes, he's not gone, I know. He will come back stronger, I know. We will be ready, I know," said Harry, and he looked across the long table at his family, all of them, and at the plate of Esme's chicken in front of him, which was the first home-cooked dinner he had eaten in 7 months. And he said, with the enormous sincerity of a 12-year-old who has spent a year being very brave, "Dad, can I have another piece of chicken?" "Yes," said Carlisle, and the family laughed, and the summer settled around them, and in Volterra, in Italy, in a chamber hung with red velvet and colder than the air outside it, Arrow of the Volturi read a short letter from a field agent, and he smiled. Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. The chamber and the air. The summer had been a good one, and Harry was not a boy who underestimated good summers. Usold had stayed at the cabin for 3 weeks in July and had run him hard, theoretical defense, wandless casting, the last of his mental doors. Emmett had run him harder, up and down the Hoe Trail. Carlisle had given him, for his 12th birthday, the 2nd volume of the grimoire and a set of silver-handled throwing knives that Esme had disapproved of and let Harry keep anyway. Rose had cut his hair. Jasper had taught him on the porch after dark, in a long, quiet conversation that Harry would remember all his life, how to breathe when he was frightened. Alice had kept her counsel. She had said once, the week before Harry was due to fly, "Your 2nd year is going to be louder than your 1st, love." And then she had not said anything more. She had been right. Dobby the house elf had appeared on the upstairs landing of the Cedar house on the 31st of July, 2 weeks before Harry was due to go back. Rose had nearly decapitated him with a lamp before Harry managed to shout that he was a friend. He was not strictly a friend. He was a small, dirty, enormously distressed creature in a pillowcase who had apparated into the house through wards that, Carlisle commented dryly afterward, had not been designed with house elves in mind. Dobby had, with much hand-twisting and many exclamations, warned Harry against returning to Hogwarts. Dark things were being prepared. Dark things were being carried. Dark things were being carried in particular by Lucius Malfoy. Harry, who had spent his summer practicing not being surprised, put the kettle on. Esme made Dobby tea. Carlisle quietly questioned him. Dobby could not say very much without clapping his own ears. Carlisle suggested, gently, that Dobby might speak if he permitted himself to say things that were not, technically, true. And Dobby stared at Carlisle for a full minute before bursting into tears and saying that nobody had ever been so kind to Dobby, nobody had ever told Dobby to lie. Dobby told them, by lying, a great deal of truth. Harry, by the end of the evening, had a shape of what was coming. He did not have all of it. He had enough to know that whatever Lucius Malfoy was putting into Hogwarts this year, it was going in at the beginning of term, which meant probably through a young Malfoy, which meant probably through a textbook or a broom or something that had been browsed in a shop. "Diagon," said Rose. "Yes," Harry said. "Diagon." They were in flourish and blots that August afternoon in the crush of an appallingly ill-conceived book signing by a blue-cloaked man named Gilderoy Lockhart. Harry had been prepared for Lockhart by Usold, who had read 2 of his books on the ferry and set them on fire at the landing with a flick of her finger. He was not prepared for the force with which Lockhart, at the signing table, tried to put his arm around Harry's shoulders for a photograph. He was prepared for what he did in response, which was to lean very slightly out of the arm, turn his smile on the camera for precisely 1 second, and move on before Lockhart had finished his line. It had been Rose's training. Lucius Malfoy came in with Draco a minute later. He was tall, slim, pale, silver-white and elegant, with a walking stick and a patience that Harry had rarely seen in a wizard. He set his eyes on Harry in the crowd and came over. Draco was behind him. Ginny Weasley was there, too, near the back of the crush, clutching a stack of donation books that Ron had helped her put together. Harry watched the shop. He was not, he thought briefly, going to win anything by being obvious. He was going to win, if at all, by being unobvious. "Young Cullen Potter, Mr. Malfoy, you remember my son, Draco?" "Yes, sir. Hello, Draco." "Hello." Draco was uncomfortable. Harry could see he was uncomfortable. He had been uncomfortable, Harry had noticed through the year, whenever his father came near him in public. Lucius tilted his head, a gesture Draco had exactly, and said, "A pleasure. I am given to understand that you are on quite good terms with young Mr. Weasley over there. He's my friend, yes, an interesting family to be friends with. They're kind and I like them very much." "So you have said." Lucius moved. He moved in a way that Harry, whose eye had been trained by Jasper, caught as a body motion disguise. He brushed the stack of Ginny's books with his silver stick. He dropped, with the tiny, controlled movement of a stage magician passing an object, a flat black diary into the stack of Ginny's books. He did not quite smile. He straightened. "I wish you a pleasant term, Mr. Cullen Potter," Lucius said. "Sir." Harry, who had also been trained by Rosalie Cullen to address rudeness from adults with pointed formality, did not move. He waited. He waited 30 more seconds until Lucius had moved on and Draco had hesitated, and then he stepped through the crowd without haste over to Ginny and Ron, and he said, as casually as he could, "Ginny, can I see your books for a second? I want to check I've got the right cauldron on my list." Ginny, wide-eyed at being addressed by Harry Cullen Potter, handed over the stack. Harry leafed through it. The diary was in the middle. He slid it out. He said, "Oh, this isn't yours. This fell in off the pile. I'll just put it back." And he walked over to the Lockhart table where Lockhart's assistant was juggling books, and he set the diary down on the edge of the pile and walked away. Nobody had seen it happen. Lucius, at the door, paused for a half-second, a gut check, and then went on. Harry did not yet know what the diary was. He knew it was dangerous. He knew it was not Ginny's. He knew, therefore, that he had performed the correct triage. He would, in the morning, write to Carlisle about it. The diary, with luck, would be bought in the next hour by somebody else, and that somebody else would be not Ginny. Alice's letter came the next morning. It was 1 sentence. That was well done. That night, after the pubs had closed and the alley was empty, A cloaked figure let itself into the Lockhart display, spent an hour paging through the pile, and left with the diary in hand. The figure wore Malfoy rings. The figure was not Lucius. It was a house servant. Lucius, arriving at the manor at 2 in the morning, was handed the diary by the servant, who was dismissed. And Lucius, who prided himself on never appearing to have been bested, permitted himself, for 20 seconds alone in his study, an extremely cold and extremely patient smile. His son, he decided, had in his schoolmate an enemy of unusual competence. It would be necessary to take this very seriously. Hogwarts' second year was loud. Alice had not been wrong, and it was loud in ways that bypassed Harry, because Harry was not at the axis of it. The diary in Lucius's study had ceased to have a schoolgirl to corrupt. Its compulsions rolled blindly out into the air, and what they caught instead were 3 or 4 unhappy Slytherin boys in a ring. And the Chamber of Secrets opened that year as it had opened 50 years before. But it did not open with Ginny Weasley at its center. It opened through one Hesper Trevenna, a silent 4th-year girl who had spent the summer writing lonely letters to the man behind the diary, and who was, by the time Harry returned to Hogwarts, already hollowed out. The petrifications began in October. Mrs. Norris first, then Colin Creevey, then Justin Finch-Fletchley. The wall above Mrs. Norris read, "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened, enemies of the air beware." The school was, by Halloween, subdued and frightened. Harry, who in his first year had not chased things, chased this. He had written to Carlisle at the first petrifaction, and Carlisle had, with the speed of a man who had been waiting for a reply from his own researches, sent a packet of 7 pages, at the top of which was the word basilisk. Harry read the pages twice. He lent them to Hermione. Hermione, who had been quietly working on her own hunt, took the basilisk notes and built a theory. The creature was a king serpent. It moved through the pipes. Its gaze killed directly, but reflection merely petrified. Its controllers spoke Parseltongue. They had in the castle, to everybody's polite horror, one self-declared Parselmouth. Harry had been invited into the dueling club in his first Halloween week because Snape, acting on an instinct he did not examine, had wanted Harry to duel Lockhart in public. Harry had, with Snape's silent, grim approval, wiped the stage with Lockhart. Then Lockhart, badly improvising, had put Harry up against Draco. A snake had appeared. The snake had reared. Draco, terrified, had stepped back. And Harry, without thinking, had hissed at it, told it gently to lie down and rest. It had done so. The hall had gone very quiet. Snape on the dais had narrowed his eyes and understood several things at once. Hermione had put it together that night. "Harry, it's you. I know. Not that it's you, but that I can talk to it. Yes, I know. Do you know how? I've known since I was 6. Our yard has a lot of garter snakes. I used to tell them to go under the porch when Rose was weeding. I didn't. I thought everyone could. Nobody can, Harry. I know, Harry. Yes. It isn't a bad thing. It's just a thing. Don't look like that. I don't look like anything. You look like you've just realized that the school thinks you're the heir of Slytherin. I already realized that. It's fine. The school will get over it. The school will absolutely not. The school will get over it in 3 weeks because we are going to find the chamber and kill the basilisk and find the controller and stop it. And then they will be so embarrassed about having suspected me that they will bake me pies for a month. Harry, we are going to do this, Hermione. It is manageable. We are going to plan it. They planned it. It took them longer than Harry had hoped. Hermione ended up petrified in February in the library, where she had been checking one last cross-reference, and Harry spent a long, white-knuckled night in the infirmary with her hand in his, Ron on her other side, and McGonagall in and out. And by morning, Harry was more focused than he had been in his life. She had, Madame Pomfrey told them, a mirror in her hand. She had already worked out that the basilisk was being routed through the mirrors of the castle's bathrooms. She had, in other words, already solved it on her back in the library. Ron, Harry said, yeah, we're going to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Yeah, tonight? Yeah. Hesper Trevenna was already down there. She had the diary on her knee. She was fading. Harry could see it in the light of his wand, thinning at the edges, the shadow of a 4th-year girl. She looked up when he came in, and in her face was somebody else, a handsome boy of 17 with oil-slick dark eyes and a calm, Harry Cullen Potter. Tom Riddle. You've read about me? Yes. You've been very patient? Yes. Your father writes you charming letters, thank you. Don't thank me, come closer, I have a great deal I want to talk to you about. I'm fine here, come closer Harry Cullen Potter or I will kill the girl. Harry looked at the girl. He looked at the diary. He had, the whole walk down, been working out how to do this without letting Tom possess him, because he had known since February that this was the corner he would have to turn. He had in his pocket 3 things. He had the holly wand, which he held visibly in his right hand. He had Olga's twist of birch and unicorn bone, which he held invisibly in his left. He had a single polished fang of the nomad female Victoria, which Emmett had sheared from her jaw 7 years before and which Carlyle had washed clean of venom and worn on a chain and given to Harry as a graduation from elementary present. He had been thinking about the fang since February. Tom. Harry said as he walked slowly closer. I know what the diary is, do you? You don't have to stay in there. I beg your pardon. It's a terrible way to exist. I am prepared, if you let the girl go, to take the diary to Dumbledore and ask him to return your soul to your main body. I do not know whether it will work. I do not know whether your main body deserves it. But your main body is not this book. This book is a rubbing of you. If you let the girl go, I will ask on your behalf. There was a very long pause. Tom Riddle's shadow flickered. You are not the child I expected. I know. You have given me a thing to think about. Good. I am still, of course, going to kill you, of course. The basilisk came out of the hole in the statue. Harry had calculated. He had had a long time to calculate. Hermione's last note, scribbled on a strip of parchment before she had been petrified, had said here, "It, don't look at it." And Harry had been practicing blindfold for 3 weeks. He dropped his gaze and he listened, and he felt, the way Jasper had taught him, the air move ahead of the weight of the thing, and when it struck, he was already not where it had struck. He came under and he brought the holly wand up, and he drove the conjunctivitis curse into its eyes, and when it reared, blinded, he let the birch-hand bone wand speak with his off-hand. And the second wand's voice, the voice Ollivander had called a second voice, cast a stone-spearing curse Usold had taught him on a wet afternoon in Ravenna, a curse that tore a 3-foot spike up out of the floor of the chamber. And the basilisk came down on the spike and impaled itself cleanly through the roof of its mouth. Harry did not wait to see it die. He was at the diary before Tom Riddle had understood that the basilisk had failed. He had Victoria's fang in his hand by then. He knelt down and drove the fang clean and fast through the book. Tom Riddle screamed. The ink boiled up out of the book's pages and blackened the air. Hesper Trevenna, across the chamber, fell sideways and began to breathe again. The shadow of the boy, handsome, calm, ruined, tore apart in a way Harry would have liked later to have been able to describe but could not. One moment there was a silhouette, and the next there was not, and the chamber smelled like old iron and older ice, and then the smell went. And the chamber smelled instead of cold water. Harry closed the book. He crossed to Hesper and took her pulse. She was alive. He picked her up because she was light, and he carried her back to the pipe, and Ron, who had been holding his own against a cave-in Gilderoy Lockhart had accidentally started in his eagerness to assist, met him at the pipe. Ron, Harry, she's alive. Help me lift her. They lifted her. Lucius Malfoy came up the Hogwarts drive 3 nights later. He was going to, as he had been going to since July, dismiss Dumbledore from his post. He was stopped at the front steps by an assortment that included Dumbledore, Minerva McGonagall, and one Harry Cullen Potter, who had asked, rather formally, to be permitted to be present. Harry handed Lucius Malfoy's diary back to him in a sock. Lucius, understanding as he took the sock precisely what had been done to him, went very still. Dobby, at Lucius's elbow, was given the sock. Dobby was, by the rule of his house's employment, thereby freed. He did a small dance of pure feeling and then, with a crack, was gone. Lucius turned on Harry with something in his eye that, for a second, looked like it might become a curse. Harry did not move. Harry stood on the front step of Hogwarts and looked at him, without arrogance, without challenge, and with the clear, still, extraordinarily polite regard of a boy who had been raised by Rosalie Cullen. Mr. Malfoy, Harry said. Mr. Cullen Potter, you will not try again. Beg your pardon. You will not try again, not against me, not against my friends, not this year. Harry's voice was perfectly level. I have spent 2 evenings with my father and Professor Dumbledore reconstructing, for public record, how a particular item came to be in a particular shop's pile this past August. I have the paperwork, I have the witness. I do not particularly want to file it. It would, I think, be ugly. Your wife's family is proud, and I would not like to visit that on them. I do not hold, ordinarily, an enemy's family against them. I hold, however, a man's actions against him. Do not try again, Mr. Malfoy. Not this year. We will see about next. The silence on the step was a tremendous silence. Dumbledore watched them. Minerva watched them. Lucius Malfoy, who had not been addressed in that tone since his own father had died, composed his face. Then, because Lucius was not stupid, he did the correct thing. He bowed his head a quarter of an inch. Mr. Cullen Potter, he said. Mr. Malfoy, a good evening, a good evening. Lucius turned and walked down the drive. He did not hurry. When he was out of sight, Dumbledore permitted himself, for the second time in Harry's acquaintance, a small, dry laugh. My dear boy, he said, you are going to make a lot of enemies. Yes, sir. And a lot of friends. Yes, sir, in approximately equal measure, I suspect. Yes, sir. Good. In Volterra, in a chamber Harry had never seen, a slight, black-haired man named Demetri returned from his long tour of the Pacific Northwest and the British Isles, and stood at Arrow's elbow and described, in the soft voice that nearly all the Volturi used indoors, what he had observed. He had observed a 12-year-old boy living with the Olympic coven. He had observed the boy arrive at a Scottish castle and return from it with a reputation. He had observed him kill a basilisk. He had observed him outwit a Malfoy. He is not afraid of us, Demetri said. No, Arrow asked, delighted. No, master, he thinks of us and his heart does not change. I tasted it. I tasted the shape of his mind. He has a wall with doors. The doors are not open to us, but the wall does not tremble when we come near it. How extraordinary, said Arrow. What do we do? Said Caius. We wait, said Arrow. We wait, we watch. I am, brother, curious. Chapter 7 and Chapter 8. Prisoner and Pack Sirius Black broke out of Azkaban on the 6th of June. The news reached Forks on the 9th, by way of a London paper that Alice had subscribed to in the winter and that the Forks post office had complained to her about twice. Esme read the front page aloud in the kitchen. Carlyle put down the knife he had been cleaning. Rosalie, who had been curling Harry's hair against Harry's mild protest, he was 13 now and had opinions about his hair, stopped curling. Everybody looked at Harry. Harry read the article upside down over Esme's shoulder. He handed her a fork. Dad, he said. Yes. This man was my father's best friend. Yes, he betrayed my parents to Voldemort, so says the paper. And you doubt it. I have read in the last hour 3 accounts of his trial, and there are no accounts. He never had one. I find that strange. Men who are guilty of selling out the Potters do not simply sit in a cell for 12 years without having been given a piece of paper to sign, son. I am not yet saying he is innocent. I am saying I will not assume he is guilty until I have seen better paperwork. Can you see better paperwork? I intend to. Carlisle Cullen spent the next 2 weeks of his summer while his son flew kites with Emmett and learned wandless fire with Usold, doing what he had been doing quietly for years, pulling strings he had been permitted over a century to string. He had a friend in London, and his friend had a husband on the Wisengamot, and the husband had a clerk, and the clerk, persuaded by a cup of coffee and the solid, unaccented English kindness of an American doctor, permitted Carlisle Cullen 3 days in a back office with a set of files he should not have been handed. Carlisle, at the end of the 3 days, knew the following things. Sirius Black had never been charged. Peter Pettigrew's body had never been recovered, only a finger. The Fidelius charm on the Potter cottage had been keyed, according to the logs, not to Sirius Black but to Peter Pettigrew, a fact which made Sirius's theoretical betrayal mechanically impossible. Somebody in the Auror office had, in October of 1981, forged a case file. He flew home on a Muggle airline in the second-class cabin with a pile of photocopies in a banker's box and an extremely grim set to his mouth. He sat at the kitchen table and showed Harry the photocopies, and Harry said, after reading them twice, "So Sirius is innocent." "Yes, and Pettigrew is alive, probably, and Pettigrew is a rat, an animagus rat, yes, and there is only one rat in England I am in a position to find. Ron Weasley's brother's pet. Yes, yes, Alice has seen him, Alice has felt him. She cannot see him directly, rats are fiddly, but she has felt, in a bad way, that he is in Britain and that he is afraid, and she says that he has been moving. And she says that your friend's brother will, in early July, release him, abandoned, she says. If we are to have him, we must have him in the first week of July, Dad. Yes. Can Uncle M come to Britain? Yes. Good. They took Pettigrew in the second week of July. They took him in a tidy, bloodless, rather unsporting manner because Cullens are not sporting people by preference. Emmett, under a glamour provided by Ussold, arrived in Ottery St. Catchpole one morning on a bicycle. He rented a cottage near the borough. He watched, through binoculars, for 3 days. On the fourth morning, a grey Thursday, Ronald Weasley emerged from the garden shed with a drooping rat in his palm and a glum expression, and said to his mother, in tones Emmett heard through the kitchen window at 200 yards, "Mum, Scabbers is dying. I'm going to let him go. He won't survive being packed, he's too old." Molly kindly nodded. Ron took Scabbers to the far edge of the paddock and knelt down and set him on the grass. Scabbers, surprised, lay there for a second. Ron, surprising himself, burst into tears. Scabbers, even more surprised, looked up at him, and in Emmett's binoculars, Emmett could see the small, cunning flicker in the rat's eye that was not a rat's, and Emmett was moving before Ron had finished standing up. He ran. He was faster than the rat. He had been an American college football fullback for a year in 1932, and he was still one of those men at heart, and he closed the last 100 yards of paddock in a time that would have embarrassed his mortal self for the rest of his afterlife. And he came down on the rat with an iron cage Ussold had prepared, and the rat went into the cage with a small, doomed, outraged squeal. Emmett latched the cage. He straightened. He tipped his hat at Ron Weasley across the field, and then he was gone at a speed that Ron, confused, did not register. Ron went home. Ron told Molly that Scabbers had died quietly and that a very fast man in a cap had picked him up and taken him away. Molly, reasonably, assumed Ron was in shock. She made him soup. The cage arrived in the Scottish Highlands that evening, in the private hands of Remus Lupin, who had been written to in a very careful letter by Minerva McGonagall at Carlyle's suggestion, and who had, at seeing Pettigrew's animal face through the bars, gone so still and so white that Minerva had put a hand on his shoulder to steady him. "Remus," she said. "Yes, are you all right?" "I am," Remus said, "going to need a minute." He took 3. Then he took the cage to Amelia Bones at the DMLE, who took it to Barty Crouch, who took it, quite against his will, into a room with 2 oars and a silver chain and a court stenographer. And by the 1st of August, Sirius Black had been quietly pardoned, no fanfare. The ministry did not enjoy publicizing its failures, and Peter Pettigrew had been placed, bound, into a cell. Sirius Black was released into Remus Lupin's custody because nobody else had asked. Harry met him on the 1st of September at King's Cross. Sirius had been warned about the Cullens, had been warned about his godson, had been warned specifically by Remus about the size of Emmett, and he had still not been prepared for what he saw. A family of 7 pale, beautiful people at the edge of platform 9¾ with a tall, bright-eyed boy at the center of them who had his mother's cheekbones and his father's walk. Sirius did not cry in public. Sirius, who was out of practice with most things, including having feelings, stood very still at the edge of platform 9¾ and stared for about 5 seconds. Then Harry saw him. Harry knew him from the photograph Sirius had decades before, posted in the dorm window of the boys' tower, which Remus had that summer sent Harry as a postcard. "Sirius," Harry said, "Pronkslit? I beg your pardon, your dad's nickname for you. I'm sorry, that was, don't be sorry." "Come here." Harry hugged him. Sirius, who had been handled since the 5th of June largely by Remus Lupin and by a very kind healer named Andromeda, took an undignified breath and hugged Harry back, and they stood for a minute, and then Sirius composed himself. "Your family," he said with a sideways glance at Rose. "Yes, they are cold, tall, and protective. Yes, you'll get used to it." Sirius shook Rose's hand. Rose's hand, firm and pale and cool, did not give an inch, and Sirius, who was a man who responded well to being squeezed, permitted himself a small, grateful grin. Carlyle shook his hand next. Emmett clapped him on the shoulder with a blow that would have put a lesser man on his knees. Sirius took it like a black. Alice hugged him around the middle briefly and said into his shirt, "You're going to live in a cabin outside of Forks starting the 6th of November, and Remus will spend most weekends with you, and you are going to like it. Don't argue with me." I wasn't going to. Good, he did not argue. By November he had a cabin and a dog. By Christmas he had a habit of coming to Sunday dinner with Remus. By the following June, when Harry had graduated from 3rd year and come home for the summer, Sirius had, entirely by accident, become an uncle. Hogwarts, 3rd year, had another kind of texture. There were Dementors on the train. Harry, who had been raised in a house with a breathing war veteran and had been trained on how to hold his own emotions, still felt the Dementors. Of course he did. No human mind resists them entirely, but he felt them as he would have felt a cold wind, not a hurricane. Remus Lupin came into the compartment at the right moment and drove the Dementor off with a silver Patronus, and Harry, who watched the Patronus with interest, filed it away. Lupin taught him the Patronus charm that Christmas, Harry had asked. Harry had said straightforwardly, "I'd like you to teach me this. Will you?" And Lupin had looked at him for a long moment and said yes, because Lupin, too, had been raised by loving adults who had taught him that a boy who asked to be taught was a boy you taught. It took a while. Harry had no shortage of happy memories, but the Patronus required a specific memory, and Harry's memories were specific. He chose a night in the previous summer, Esme playing piano with Edward, Emmett losing at cards, Rose brushing his hair, Jasper pretending to read, Alice humming with her head on Carlyle's shoulder, Sirius and Remus arguing about a Quidditch team nobody in the room cared about, and he cast. The Patronus that came out of his wand was not a stag, although the central figure was. It was a stag, and around the stag, shoulder to shoulder, stood 7 figures in silhouette, each with a hand raised. They were not specific enough to name, but they were specific enough to count, and they formed a ring around the stag that was, to any witch or wizard who had ever before produced a Patronus, plainly, unarguably, not ordinary. Lupin looked at it for a long second. Then, gently, he said, "Harry." "Yes, that is a very powerful Patronus. Thank you. It is the kind of Patronus a person produces when a person has never in his life been alone." Oh, Harry did not know what to say to that for a minute. Then he said, with the half-smile his mother would have recognized, "I suppose that's true. It is a very great thing to never have been alone. Yes, your father would have been proud of you. Thank you. Your mother too. Yes, Harry, yes. May I tell you a thing, please?" Lupin, who had been standing by the window, sat down. He had been, Harry realized, steeling himself for this moment all term, the way Lupin steeled himself for most moments. He folded his hands. "I was not, a friend to your parents the way I should have been at the end," Lupin said. "I was suspicious of Sirius wrongly. I was suspicious of your father's other friends wrongly. I let myself be convinced that the problem was in the friends I could see and not in the friend I could not. I did not. I am very sorry, Harry. Your parents were my closest friends, and I did not do for them what friends do, which is fight for them. I put my head down and I let an official account be the account, and 12 years later I find that the account was written by a man who had forged files. I would like you to know that I am very sorry, Harry. I have been sorry every day for 12 years, Remus. Yes, I wasn't raised to carry other people's debts. Pardon? I wasn't raised to carry other people's debts. My Aunt Rose taught me that you cannot do other people's apologies for them, and you cannot make them forgive themselves for you. You can only offer them a chair. Sit down, please. You're a friend of my parents. You're a friend of mine. I don't hold you responsible. I don't have room to. Come for Christmas next year and bring Sirius and we'll have you to dinner. All right. Lupin had lost his voice for a second. When he had found it, he said, yes, all right, thank you, Harry. Thank you for the Patronus lesson. You're welcome. They parted. Harry went home to Forks for the summer at 13 3/4 and discovered that Forks had, in his absence, changed. Specifically, Jacob Black had started growing. He had gotten about 8 inches taller in the year, which was fast even for a Quileute boy, and the fever had come on him in April. And Billy Black had driven him up to Sam Uli's house in the middle of the night in the middle of the month, and Jacob had come back from the woods a week later on 4 legs. Harry met him, for the first time post-phase, on the beach at La Push in July. Jacob was 16-sized in a 14-year-old's life, with shoulders that had not been there in March and a heat coming off him that Harry felt at 10 paces. Jake, Harry, you're a wolf. Yeah, we should compare our summers. Come up the fire, man, come up the fire, I want you to meet them. Harry walked into the La Push pack's firelight that evening at Jake's right shoulder, and the pack, which had been drawing breath to be suspicious of a Cullen boy, looked at the way Jake was standing, open, relaxed. Happy, and they looked at Harry and saw a lean, dark-haired human boy with green eyes who did not smell quite like a human, and who also did not smell quite like a vampire, and who smelled, in fact, like something the pack had only a dim half-memory of in their collective stories. And Sam Uli, who was chief then, stood up and put out his hand, and Harry put out his hand, and they shook, and the pack made a noise of approval, a collective exhalation, and after that nobody's summer was quite the same. Your boy, said Billy Black to Carlyle on the porch of the Cedar House the next evening in a voice that had been threaded through with decades of cold treaty distance, is not your usual son. No, he is not in particular a cold one. No, he is not in particular anything I have a name for. No. Billy, yes, are we still at peace? Billy Black looked at Carlyle for a long second. Then he looked across the yard at Harry, who was wrestling with Emmett in a way that was half martial arts and half cartoon, and he said slowly, Dr. Cullen, I find that we are, for the first time in my memory, at something better than peace. I am going to go home and drink a beer. I do not know why I am going to do this. I am going to do it anyway. You're welcome any time, Billy. Thank you. Billy Black drove away. Harry, across the yard, pinned Emmett for the first time in his life. Emmett roared with delight, gave him a noogie and let him up, and Harry, flushed with the first real taste of adulthood, came up the porch steps 2 at a time. Rose, he said, I think I pinned Uncle M on purpose. I know you did, I saw it. Are you proud? I am insufferable, said Rose with pride. Come here, your hair is a crime. Rose, shut up, sit down. He sat down. She combed his hair. The cedars leaned in. Chapter 8 and Chapter 9. The tournament and the Dark Lord the Goblet spat his name on Halloween, and Harry, who had known since September that the Triwizard Tournament was coming to Hogwarts, had not, until the moment his name burned across the air in Dumbledore's handwriting, believed in his bones that it would come for him. He did not get up. Ron, beside him, had stood without meaning to. Hermione's hand had gone to Harry's elbow. Around them, the great hall had gone to that particular kind of silence that is all noise compressed. Dumbledore had been reading out names, Fleur de Lacre from Beauxbatons, Victor Crumb from Durmstrang, Cedric Diggory from Hogwarts, and the hall had been clapping, and then the goblet had flared a 4th time, and in the air above it, a 4th name had burned. Harry Cullen Potter, don't get up. Hermione whispered, I'm not going to. Don't do anything. I'm not going to. Dumbledore read the name aloud in a voice that had no surprise in it. Then he looked down the long room at Harry, and his blue eyes were very clear, and he made a very small gesture with one hand that meant wait. Harry waited. Barty Crouch Sr. came over from the staff table and said something to Dumbledore that Harry could not hear. Karkaroff was already shouting in French-accented English. Madame Maxime was on her feet in French-accented outrage. Dumbledore raised a hand and the whole room went silent again, and then he said, Harry, if you would come with me, please. Harry went. Ron came with him as far as the antechamber door. Hermione stayed to watch their backs. In the antechamber, with Crouch, Karkaroff, Maxime, Ludo Bagman, and a handful of staff watching, Dumbledore crouched down in front of Harry and put his hand on his shoulder. Dumbledore's hand was warm as it always was and surprisingly heavy. "Harry, sir. You did not put your name in the goblet." "No, sir." "I did not think you did. I am obliged, however, to ask, will you give me your word?" "Yes, sir, I did not put my name in the goblet. I did not ask anybody to put my name in the goblet. I have spent my October afternoons training and writing my godfather and going to Hogsmeade with my friends. I have not been near the goblet. I have been avoiding the goblet, in fact, because my Aunt Alice sent me a letter 2 weeks ago that said, quote, 'Stay out of the hall at lunch on the 19th. And I stayed out of the hall at lunch on the 19th because my Aunt Alice is rarely wrong about anything. And Alice does not know who did it. No, sir, she tried. There's something blocking her. She did tell me to expect it anyway.'" Dumbledore did not answer for a long second. Then, he said, "This is a setup. You are going to walk into it with your eyes open. I will do what I can from the staff side." "Bartemius, I am afraid our poor boy is bound by contract." "Quite," said Crouch coldly. "He is. Then he is a champion and we shall treat him as one. Harry, write home tonight." "Yes, sir." "And," Dumbledore paused with a small lift at the corner of his mouth, "tell your father I would like an analytical copy of whatever his daughter saw or did not see." "I will, sir." Karkaroff behind them was bristling, Maxime was huffing, Crouch was glaring, Bagman was laughing because Bagman was a fool. Cedric Diggory, who had come back in with the other champions, caught Harry's eye across the room, and Cedric, to his enormous credit, gave Harry a single, grave, sympathetic nod, and the nod said, "I believe you." Harry nodded back. He had, he decided, an ally. The dragon in the first task was a Hungarian horntail, and Harry, who did not intend to die for a tournament, took it on with the training of a boy who had been taught by an elderly Italian witch to treat everything as a system. He did not ride his broom around it. He did not, despite the egging of the crowd, attempt a showboat. He cast a transfiguration, the stones of the arena floor into 100 small mirrors, arrayed in a low, uneven ring, and then he cast a second charm which scattered a light off the mirrors in 1,000 small glares into the dragon's eyes. The dragon, annoyed, batted the mirrors. Harry, in the confusion, moved around the dragon's flank on foot and took the golden egg from the nest with one hand while not looking at the dragon at all. He walked out of the ring in under 3 minutes with a single scorch mark on his sleeve. The crowd, uncertain whether to cheer, eventually cheered. The Daily Prophet the next morning ran with 11-year seeker outsmarts Horntail. Rita Skeeter had been too busy that morning trying to interview Emmett to make the article more flattering than that. Emmett had come for the first task. Emmett, to his delight, had been told he could come for all of them. Emmett, under a glamour, sat in the top row beside Esme. Rosalie had tried to come. Rosalie had had to be talked out of it by Carlyle, who had told her plainly that she would eat a reporter if she came to the first task. And Rose, who had considered this as an argument against going, had conceded, after some persuasion, that she would come to the second task instead. Because by the second task she would have had time to acclimate. The second task was what they had come to fear. Harry had opened the egg under water in the prefect's bath and had heard the song of the merfolk, and he had understood what the tournament intended to do. It intended to steal for an hour something he loved. Harry had written home. Harry had said plainly in a letter that Alice had read aloud to the family on the porch, "The tournament will take someone. I believe the charm will identify the person closest to me. I believe that person will be Ron or Hermione or Rose. I would like, if possible, for it to be Ron or Hermione." Alice had looked up from the letter with a thin smile. "He's giving them a choice of hostage." "Yes," Esme said, "the child is calculating." "Yes," said Carlyle, "I am very proud." The charm, as it happened, chose Hermione and Ron because the charm was cleverer than any of them had given it credit for, and it chose both in order, it appeared, to weight Harry against his human friends rather than against his cold family. It was a relief. Rose, in the stands, who had come for the second task in a long wool coat and a pair of gloves, did not get to dive. Harry, warmed briefly by this relief, went into the water anyway with a grimness that was less tournament and more, as Hermione would put it later, an old debt being paid. He had trained in the Olympic Peninsula's winter water since he was 7. He swam better than any of the other champions. He pulled Ron and Hermione from the lake in under 40 minutes, which was not a record, but which was quite fast enough. Fleur had been pulled back by her team. Krum had taken only his partner. Cedric, like Harry, had brought up two, himself and Fleur's little sister. The judges were briefly scandalized. The crowd briefly cheered. Harry got out of the water, wrapped Ron in a towel, hugged Hermione for a long minute, and then walked up the shingle to where Rose was waiting with dry clothes. "I hate this tournament," Rose said into his hair. "I know. I am going to write the ministry a letter. I know. The letter is going to be rude. I would expect nothing less." The third task was at the end of June. Alice could not see it. Alice had been unable to see it for weeks. Harry had written home about this, and Carlisle had written back at 2 in the morning Pacific time, 3 terse sentences. "Someone is blocking her. They are blocking her because they know she can see. They are blocking her because they plan to take you. Assume a portkey. Under your skin, under your watch, under your shoe." Harry read the letter 3 times and then, very deliberately, put it in his pocket. The maze went up in the afternoon. Harry had slept the full night before because Usold had drilled into him the discipline of sleeping the full night before. He had eaten well because Esme had sent him a hamper. He had spoken to his father at 2 in the morning by way of a 2-way mirror Alice had given him. And Carlisle had told him 3 things: the first, that he loved him; the second, that no matter what happened, he would come for him; and the third, that he had already arranged with Arrow of the Volturi, if the worst happened, for Demetri to track him. Harry had nodded. He had said he loved his father. He had closed the mirror and gone into the maze. The maze was bad. Harry navigated it well enough. He navigated it more quickly than Victor Krum, whom Harry stunned when Krum attacked Cedric Diggory under the Imperious Curse, and then carefully untangled from the curse with Hermione's field guide notes, and as quickly as Fleur, who gave up after an acromantula ambush and rocketed red sparks. That left Harry and Cedric. They reached the cup together. Harry had been watching for this. He had been, in fact, counting on it. "Cedric, Harry, do not touch the cup." "What? It's a portkey. I can feel it from here. Don't touch it." "How can you feel?" "I was raised by an empath." "I can feel a charm at 10 paces. Don't touch it." "Then what?" "I am going to take it. If I take it, I am going to come back. I want you to stand over here out of its range and send up red sparks the instant I am gone. Dumbledore is waiting for it." "Harry, let me come." "Cedric, please." "Do not come. I don't know where it's going. I only know there is a plan. Let me. Red sparks when I am gone. Everybody's waiting. If I am not back in 10 minutes, Dumbledore will know. Go." Cedric looked at him for a second. Then Cedric, who had decency in him, stepped back. He raised his wand. Harry touched the cup. He was jerked through space in the stomach-turning spiral of a portkey. He closed his eyes. He opened them. He was in a graveyard. It was night. There was a tall hedge. There was a headstone that read Tom Riddle. There was a cauldron. There was Peter Pettigrew, out of Azkaban then, escaped or aided, he did not yet know, and there was, being lowered into the cauldron in the hands of Pettigrew, a thin, small, red-eyed thing that was shaped like a human child and was not. "The boy," said Voldemort from his cauldron. "Yes, master?" "Tie him." "Yes, master." Pettigrew came for him. Harry did not run. Usold had told him in Italian on the terrace of her little house, "When you know you are cornered, do not run. Running exposes your back. Be still, be patient, wait for their hubris." He was tied. He did not resist. He let Pettigrew bind him to the headstone. He noted from his wrist that the tracker Carlisle had placed under his skin when he was 8, a small silver cylinder embedded under the muscle of his left forearm, was warming. Demetri, he realized, was already tracking him. Carlisle, he realized, had already mirrored him. The family, he realized, was coming. So was Dumbledore. So were the Volturi. So probably was Emmett. The ritual began. Pettigrew threw in the bone of the father. Pettigrew cut off his own hand. Pettigrew took with a knife Harry's blood from the crook of his arm, and Harry, watching him, permitted himself a thin smile. Voldemort, in a new body, rose out of the cauldron. Voldemort looked at Harry, and his red eyes found Harry's, and the first thing Voldemort said was, "You are not the Potter I was promised." "No," Harry said. "What are you?" "A Cullen Potter." "That is unacceptable." "Yes," Harry said, because he could not help it. That is what my mother warned you about. Voldemort's face did something quite extraordinary. It went very still. Then it smiled, very slowly, and the smile was the smile of a man who had decided to take his time. Let us have a duel then, Harry Cullen Potter. I should like to kill you the proper way. You are welcome to try. Pettigrew cut his bonds. Harry stepped off the headstone. Voldemort, taller than Harry had expected, paler, thinner, with his wand lighter than a wand ought to be, made the first move. He cast the Cruciatus Curse. Harry fell. Harry got up. Voldemort cast it again. Harry fell. Harry got up. He did not scream. He could not have screamed. Usold had drilled him. Jasper had drilled him. He had inside his head a small, clean room with a door to it, and he was in the small, clean room, and the screaming, the part of him that was screaming, was outside the door. Bo, Harry Cullen Potter. No, Bo, no. Harry said quite pleasantly as he straightened up out of the third Cruciatus. They dueled. Voldemort was, as his mother's letter had said, a great wizard, and Harry was a well-trained 14-year-old, but something happened that Voldemort had not, it transpired, planned for. Voldemort's Avada Kedavra met Harry's Expelliarmus, and the two wands, brother wands, each containing a feather from the same phoenix, refused each other. Priori incantatum, a cage of light. Echoes of earlier spells rose from Voldemort's wand in the forms of those he had last killed, a muggle caretaker, a witch, and at the end, a tall, lean man and a red-haired woman. James and Lily Potter. Harry, said Lily Potter's echo. Hold on. I'm holding on, Harry said. Harry. Said James's echo, we're proud of you, son. Get out of here, break the connection and go. I can do that. Do it. Harry broke the connection in the manner Usold had taught him 3 summers before. He dropped into a crouch, threw himself sideways, and while Voldemort's wand was still singing, he grabbed Cedric's portkey, which had been knocked from Harry's belt in the fall and which had landed, glowing, 3 feet from Harry's hand. And he grabbed it, and he thought hard of the Hogwarts maze. And he was jerked away. He landed in the center of the maze on his side. Cedric, who had stayed, was on his feet in an instant. The red sparks had long since gone up. The crowd, under a dozen stewards' wands, had been herded back. Dumbledore was already running. Minerva was 2 paces behind him. Moody was 4 paces behind her. Harry, on his side, breathing hard, lifted his wand one last time and said in a voice that was meant for Cedric, "He's back. Tell the headmaster, he's back. Voldemort is back," Cedric said with the calm of a boy who had decided that evening to become a man. "I'll tell him, rest." Harry rested. The Cullens arrived a half-hour later. Emmett came first, because Emmett ran the fastest. He burst out of the Forbidden Forest and came up the hill and came through the tournament ward in a way that should not have been possible, and that Dumbledore later decided not to examine too closely. And he scooped Harry off the grass and into his arms before Madame Pomfrey had finished her incantation, and he held Harry, a 12-year-old in an 18-year-old's body, to his enormous chest, and he said over and over, "I've got you, kid, I've got you, I've got you, I've got you." Rosalie came next, and Esme after her, and Carlisle on their heels, and Jasper and Alice behind them. And the 7 Cullens closed around Harry in a pale, cold, fiercely gentle ring under the astonished eyes of a few hundred wizards and witches, and Dumbledore, who had come up behind them, did not say a word. He let the family have their minute. Fudge, the minister, spluttered and protested at the edge. Fudge, the minister, was ignored. Alice turned her small, pale face to the nearest journalist, one Rita Skeeter, who had taken a long time to get close, and she said clearly, "For the record, I am Alice Cullen. I see the future. I have seen Voldemort's return. It happened tonight in a graveyard in Little Hangleton. I have seen his plans, or what I can of them. I intend to make a statement to the press in the morning. Good night." Rita Skeeter, for the first time in her life, was silent. She was silent because Rita Skeeter had been reading the Daily Prophet for weeks about Alice Cullen, and had not, until that moment, believed any of it. She was silent because Alice Cullen had, in speaking, looked at her for 3/4 of a second, and in those 3/4 of a second, Rita had seen in her own future a number of things she had no intention of living through. "Yes, ma'am," Rita said demurely, and Rita went to write a different article than the one she had come to write. Demetri appeared an hour later at the edge of the forest in his long, black cloak. He did not approach the family. He looked only at Carlyle from 50 yards away, and he bowed, slow, formal, correct, and then he was gone. Caius had, at Arrow's instruction, sent him with a message. The message Carlyle would read in a letter on his desk the following morning was this: the Volturi recognize the re-emergence of the wizard called Voldemort as a threat to the ancient agreements between our peoples. You have our support. Further correspondence will follow. Arrow. Carlyle, reading the letter in his own house 3 days later with his son safe in the next room, permitted himself, for the first time in 140 years, to say a word he had not, as a young man, been permitted to say. He said it quietly. "Good," he said. And then he went in to Harry, because Harry, that night, was the only place he wanted to be. Chapter 9 and Chapter 10. The Battle for Forks and the World. Dumbledore came to Forks in the first week of August. He did not come as a headmaster. He came as a man. He was wearing a muggle suit, quite a good one, and he had his beard tied back, and he walked up the drive of the Cedar House in the long, cool green of an Olympic afternoon with his hands clasped behind him, and he stopped at the foot of the steps and looked up at Carlyle on the porch and said, "May I come in?" "Yes," Carlyle said, "please." They sat in the study. Harry was there. Alice was there. Esme was there. Rosalie was there with her arms folded and her face composed into the careful neutrality she wore at this time in the company of human men she had not yet decided to like. Jasper was on the stairs where he could see but not be seen, because Jasper at this moment needed distance. Edward was at the window. Emmett, for once, was not in the room. He had, at Carlyle's request, gone to La Push to sit with Billy Black. Dumbledore opened his hands. "I am going to tell you," he said. "Some things I should have told Harry's family a year ago. I did not because I hoped I would not have to. I hope for many things and am often wrong. There is a prophecy. There is, I am afraid, more than a prophecy. Please hear me out," he told them. He told them about the prophecy from Sybil Trelawney's lips in 1980. He told them about Voldemort's strategy for cheating death. He told them about Horcruxes, about the 7 fragments of Voldemort's soul, about the diary Harry had destroyed, and the ring on Marvolo Gaunt's hand, and the locket that Regulus Black had stolen, and the cup in Bellatrix Lestrange's Gringotts vault, and the diadem of Rowanor Ravenclaw that he suspected Voldemort had hidden in the room of requirement. He told them about the snake Nagini. And then he told them, with a composure that cost him, about the last fragment, that the night Voldemort had cast the killing curse at a baby in Godric's Hollow, a 7th fragment had unintentionally lodged in that baby's scar. Rosalie made a noise. Esme made no noise at all. I suspected this. Dumbledore said, "I suspected it for years. I had not confirmed it until this summer. Voldemort's echo, his presence in Harry's head. Harry, you have felt it, haven't you? Confirms it. There is a piece of him in you." Harry did not move. He had known for 2 years. Alice had told him on the 4th of July last summer, in a quiet voice in an empty kitchen, that there was a black thread in his future and that it had to be cut. He had told her he suspected what it was. Alice had said carefully that she did not yet know how to cut it. She had said she would work on it. She had, for a year, worked on it. Now Dumbledore was working on it too, and Harry, in a fair part of himself, was glad. "Sir," Harry said. "Yes, I'd like to propose something, please." Harry folded his hands. "I don't want to die," he said. "I don't want to die, and I don't want to orphan my family, and I don't want to be cheap about this. I think the piece of him in me can be removed without removing me. I think we have the resources between us to do it. I think we have a vampire venom that can kill a Horcrux without killing its host." Carlyle has been reading. "I think we have an old master wizard who knows every cleansing rite in Europe. I think we have a seer who can see whether it has worked. I want to try, sir. I don't want to walk into a forest and let him cast the killing curse at me." Dumbledore was silent. "It is," Dumbledore said slowly, "not what I had expected you to say, Harry. I know, you expected me to say I would do it. I am saying I would rather not, Carlyle. Sir. Is your theory testable? Yes. There are notes in the Volturi library that describe a soul fragment removal that has been performed twice in the last 1,000 years. The first performed was on a shield boy of the House of Romanov in 1137. The second was performed on a weasel girl of the House of Valois in 1474. Both succeeded. Both used a specific apothecary rite that combines a cleansing charm with a venom from one of our kind, applied in measured dose. Alice has seen the outcome, and the outcome is a living Harry. We have been preparing quietly for several weeks, and if it fails, then we have failed, and we have 3 seconds in which to try the other thing. It will not fail. Alice, sir, you have seen it. I have seen it. I have seen Harry sit up. I have seen him sit up very angry. I do not recommend that anyone be in the room who does not want to be hugged very hard for about 4 minutes. Carlyle is going to cry. I am going to cry. Rose is not. Rose is going to straighten Harry's collar and say something sarcastic. It is going to be a very good day. Am I describing it well enough? You, Dumbledore said, are a miracle of a woman. Yes, Alice said, with the sweet, serious grin of a person who had been hearing this for a century and still enjoyed it. I am. Dumbledore stood up. He set his hand lightly on Harry's head, which Harry permitted, and then he drew his hand back and he said, Then we will do it your way. Not mine, yours. I will go and fetch the other fragments. I will bring them here. You will help me. We will destroy them together. When we have destroyed all but Nagini, I will bring Nagini to you, or I will ask the Volturi to bring Nagini to you, and we will finish it. And then you will sit up in a chair in this house, and Rose will say something sarcastic to you. I will go with you, Harry said. Not here. I will help you find them. Your family, my family, will come. They are going to be insufferable about it. They are going to come. Rosalie Cullen, against a wall, permitted herself to laugh. We are, she said. The Horcrux hunt took 9 weeks. It was not, in the telling, a heroic quest. It was a job. Harry, Carlyle, Esme, Alice, Dumbledore, Hermione, who had refused to be left out and had been permitted by her parents. Once they had been introduced to Carlyle, and once they had discussed it over 3 cups of tea to take a gap year, Ron, Sirius, and Remus. These 9. Divided into 3-person teams, worked at a pace and with an efficiency that would have been, in the old days, the envy of entire Auror departments. The ring at Little Hangleton was found by Dumbledore, who this time, with Alice at his shoulder, did not put it on. They destroyed it with a basilisk fang Harry had brought up from the chamber. The locket at Grimmauld Place was retrieved by Sirius, Hermione, and the house elf creature, whom Hermione, with some patience, coaxed. The cup at Gringotts was recovered by the goblins themselves, once Carlyle, in a sober diplomatic visit, explained the matter. The goblins had, for some centuries, a grievance with Voldemort, and they took the cup out of Bellatrix's vault without fuss, bowed to Harry, handed it over. Destroyed it with their own foundry and kept the ash. The diadem came out of the room of requirement when Harry and Ron went back to Hogwarts for a week in September, letting themselves in with Minerva's connivance. Nagini was the one who did not come quietly. Nagini was still with Voldemort. Which meant Voldemort had to come to them. They gave him every incentive. Alice, in collaboration with Rita Skeeter, whose second Wizarding War coverage, starting that autumn, was better than her first Wizarding War coverage, told the Daily Prophet that Harry Cullen Potter had retired to Forks, Washington. She did not quite lie. She did say, in a direct quotation, that Harry was sheltering there with his family and did not intend to return to the United Kingdom. This infuriated Voldemort. Voldemort, who had spent the summer rebuilding his forces in secret and who had planned to take his time, could not bear the insult. He gathered his inner circle. He moved his timetable. He planned, as Alice had in fact predicted and intended, an attack on the Cullen property in the first week of November. He did not understand, because Voldemort, despite everything, remained a man who had been educated in a single country, that there were other nations that might take an interest in him. He did not know, when he came, that the Volturi had accepted Dumbledore's invitation to a formal conference in Volterra in October. He did not know that Aero, Caius, and Marcus had arrived on the Cullen property in an enormous black car a full week before he did, with Demetri in the passenger seat and Jane and Alec in the back. He did not know that the La Push Pack had phased to a collective 16, and had, under Sam's leadership, moved to the eastern edge of the Cullen clearing, and had, with Billy Black's formal blessing, declared themselves allies. He did not know that the Order of the Phoenix, under Alastor Moody's reconstitution, had crossed the Atlantic in a manner that involved a French port, a series of international portkeys, and a great many borrowed passports, and was now arrayed in the pines just north of the property line. He did not know that Dumbledore's army, 30 students, mostly 5th through 7th years, organized by Hermione Granger during the summer, had been stationed at Hermione's and Harry's considered insistence in the cellar of the Cullen house, where they were safe from the first wave and in reserve if the first wave came through. He did not know that Neville Longbottom had the sword of Gryffindor across his knees, on loan from the Sorting Hat, and was sitting on a porch step beside Luna Lovegood humming a song Luna's father had taught her. He did not know any of it. Voldemort, for all his intelligence, suffered from the flaw common to supreme narcissists. He never imagined the rooms he had not been invited to. He came in on a black broom at 2 in the morning on the 5th of November. 38 Death Eaters came with him. They came in over the cedars. They came in at a steep angle, Bellatrix Lestrange at his right hand, the Lestrange brothers behind her, Lucius Malfoy 2 behind them, Fenrir Greyback at the rear. Nagini rode across Voldemort's shoulders. She was enormous. She had grown since June. Alice had told them he would come at 2. Alice had told them he would come in over the cedars. Alice had told them how many were with him, in what order they would land, which of them would throw the first spell, and which of them would try to run. Alice had stood in the middle of the Cullen living room at 10 p.m. and had briefed the assembled allies with the economy of a small girl who had been reviewing Scouts' reports for a month, and when she had finished she had gone to Jasper, put her hand on his cheek and said, "Darling, I love you, be good." "I will. I'll see you after." "Yes, you will." The battle was short. It was short because Voldemort had not, as Carlyle would explain later, believed in any of the other parties. He had, for instance, entirely failed to include in his planning a contingency for the Volturi. Arrow, in a black cloak that fluttered in the broom wind, watched the Death Eaters land on the lawn with the patient interest of a man watching an insect land on a window. And when the Death Eaters were halfway between the tree line and the house, Arrow gestured with one pale finger, and Jane, small, young-looking and dressed in the manner of a girl of about Harry's age, opened her mouth and closed it again, and 6 Death Eaters on the edge of the front rank fell to their knees with their hands over their ears, screaming. Alec, beside her, made a small flicking gesture, and 8 more Death Eaters simply went quiet and still, because Alec had turned off their senses. Bellatrix Lestrange, who was tougher than her colleagues and who had, besides, been trained against legilimency, stayed on her feet. Voldemort stayed on his feet. Lucius Malfoy stayed on his feet, which surprised Lucius Malfoy more than anybody. The Lestrange brothers stayed on their feet. The rest fell or wavered. Jasper Whitlock, in his Confederate days, had known how to win a battle where his side was outnumbered. He came out of the cedars at that moment with Emmett, Edward, and Rosalie on his left and the La Push wolves on his right, and they hit the Death Eater line from the flank, and the line broke. Wolves took 7 Death Eaters in the first 30 seconds. Rose, who had been waiting for this for 3 months, took Bellatrix Lestrange by the throat and put her through a tree. Bellatrix, to her credit, got up from it. And the 2 of them spent the next 4 minutes in a fight that the combatants would afterward remember as a private duel, and that the onlookers would remember as a blur. Remus Lupin was on Greyback in the same 30 seconds. Dumbledore came down the drive in a blue robe with his hair loose, and he was, for the first time Harry had seen, a man at war. He moved in the brisk economical manner of a great wizard who had been a soldier once, and Voldemort, seeing him, set himself for the duel Dumbledore had come for. The 2 oldest wizards in the world met in the middle of the clearing, and for the long minute that followed, a minute that the Daily Prophet would describe as the most important minute of the century, nobody else moved. Voldemort had, for that minute, his greatest enemy's full attention. Which had been, of course, the point. Harry, behind the smoke, with Hermione at his elbow and Ron behind him and Neville beside him, was moving around the clearing's edge. He had in his hand the sword of Gryffindor, which Neville had pressed into his hand 10 minutes before with a small, grave, decisive look, and he was going for Nagini. Nagini, seeing him come, reared up off Voldemort's shoulders, and as she reared, Rosalie Cullen, having finished for the moment with Bellatrix, came at Nagini from the other side, and in a movement of perfectly coordinated fury, Harry brought the sword down and Rose brought her hand up. And Nagini, severed cleanly, fell in 2 pieces at their feet. The scream that came out of Voldemort when she died was the scream of a man who had, at last, understood that he had miscalculated. He threw Dumbledore off with a force that sent Dumbledore into the porch railing. He turned on Harry. "You," he spat, "you, Cullen Potter." "Yes," Harry said, "I should have finished you in the graveyard. You should have finished my mother." Voldemort's red eyes flared. "Duel me one more time." "Yes," Harry said, "let's." The duel was quick. Voldemort was weaker than he had been in the graveyard. He had lost, in the last 2 minutes, his snake and his favorite lieutenant and his carefully amassed force. Harry was stronger. Harry had slept. Harry had eaten his mother's chicken for 2 years of summers. Harry had been drilled by Usold, drilled by Jasper, drilled by Emmett. Harry had in his pocket the second wand, and he used it. He let Voldemort's Avada Kedavra hit him in the chest. He did it on purpose. He dropped. Dumbledore shouted. Rose shouted. Esme, from the porch, came down the steps at a speed none of them had seen. But Harry, inside the small, clean room in his own head, waited for something that he had been told, by Carlisle, by Alice, by the Volturi apothecary Arrow had sent 4 weeks ago, was going to happen. He felt in the center of his chest the black thread burn. He felt the fragment of Voldemort in his scar come apart. He felt, under the burn, the rest of him, the real him, hold. He was not dead. He had, for a moment, been a place where something else had died, and the something else, which had mistaken him for its vessel, could not bear the burning. It went out of him. It went out in a small, unexpected puff of ash. He opened his eyes. Voldemort, 20 paces away, was gaping. Nobody in 77 years had survived an Avada from his wand. Impossible, Voldemort said. Yes, Harry agreed and stood up. Impossible, and yet, Harry raised his wand. He said the spell he had been holding since the beginning of the duel, which was an Expelliarmus, not because he was, at heart, a merciful boy, which he was, but because it was the correct spell against Voldemort's brother wand. Voldemort cast the killing curse one final time because he had nothing else and because he refused in his last second to learn. The wands sang at each other the way they had in Little Hangleton. But this time Harry was stronger, and the wand which had, Dumbledore would explain to Harry afterward, acknowledged Harry as its rightful master the moment Harry had sacrificed himself for the room full of people he loved, shot out of Voldemort's hand. It came across the clearing in a clean arc. Harry caught it with his left. Voldemort's final killing curse, unwanded, came back on him. It went through him the way a dropped knife goes through water, and at the other side of him there was nothing of him left. Tom Riddle's body fell, hollowed, into the wet leaves of the Cullen clearing, and the red went out of his eyes, and that was the end. The clearing was quiet for about 9 seconds. Then Rosalie Cullen, who had promised Alice she would not cry, did not cry. She crossed the clearing at a human's pace. She was being careful, and she came to Harry. She put her hand on the back of his neck. She looked into his face. He looked into hers. His eyes were very bright. Hers, gold that day because she had fed in the afternoon, were bright too. Harry. She said, "Rose, your collar," she said, "is a disgrace." She straightened it. Alice, 20 paces away, was laughing so hard into Jasper's shoulder that she could not speak. Hermione, coming up behind Harry, burst into tears. Ron, who had been mostly silent, went to Hermione and put his arms around her. Neville, with the sword of Gryffindor at his feet, sat down abruptly on the grass and wept. Dumbledore, brushing himself off, walked across the clearing and permitted himself, for the last time that anybody in the story saw, a smile so bright that it was, for a moment, the biggest thing in the clearing. Arrow came up behind him with Jane at his side, and Arrow said with the polite, considering, calm, hungry courtesy of a Volturi king, "Well done, Dr. Cullen. Well done, Mr. Cullen Potter. Well done, all of you. We shall be on our way." You will stay for breakfast, Arrow, my dear friend. Stay for breakfast, Carlyle? Arrow, stay for breakfast. Esme has made tea. Arrow, who had not had breakfast among mortals since 1341, laughed. He laughed the way Alice laughed, which was by surprise because even Arrow did not expect to laugh that morning. He said yes. He stayed. He sat in the long kitchen of the Cullen house, with Esme's tea in front of him that he did not drink, and with Dumbledore across the table from him who did. And the two of them talked in French for an hour, in a voice so low that nobody heard what they said. And at the end of the hour they stood up, and Arrow bowed to Dumbledore, and Dumbledore bowed to Arrow, and the Volturi filed out to their black car, and they went. Dumbledore stayed another day. He did one thing that morning that Harry would, for all his life, remember. He knelt down there in the kitchen in front of Harry, and he said very quietly, "I am sorry. I am sorry I was not a better custodian of you, Harry. I am sorry I did not find you in 1982, and I am sorry I was cautious when I finally did. I want to tell you plainly that I am glad now that I was outmaneuvered by a small woman with a blue dress. Your family was a better plan than mine would have been. I hope you will forgive me. There is nothing to forgive, sir. There is. You are kind to say otherwise, sir. Yes. Come to dinner? I beg your pardon. Come to dinner. Next week. Esme has made a list of British dishes she would like to try. You can sit next to her. She will quiz you on the recipes. You will be able to say which ones are wrong. Will you come?" Dumbledore looked at him. His eyes were wet. They were not wet often. "Yes, Harry, I will come." "Thank you, sir." "Thank you, Harry." They buried nobody on the Cullen property because nobody of theirs had died there. Cedric Diggory was alive because Harry had left him at the hedge. Sirius was alive and moved to a bigger cabin with Remus and a garden. Sam's pack had come through it whole, 2 of them with broken ribs, all of them proud. Dumbledore's army came out of the cellar at 3 in the morning and stood in a ring in the clearing and cheered until the sun rose. And Luna Lovegood, in a voice that carried, sang a song her father had taught her that Harry, never once in his life after that morning, would hear without smiling. Ron stayed for 2 weeks. Hermione stayed for 6. The Cullens' house, which had never housed humans except for Harry, learned in that autumn to accommodate them. Esme cooked. Rose refused to cook. Emmett, shirtless, split firewood. Carlyle, in the evenings, sat in his study and wrote a letter to Arrow, a letter to Dumbledore, a letter, finally, to a woman in Ottery St. Catchpole whose youngest son had stayed with them and had been, as Carlyle phrased it, an unexpected gift. Molly Weasley read that letter 3 times and cried into her apron and put it in a drawer she kept for the letters she intended to keep forever. One Christmas Eve, 5 years later, on the porch of the Cedar House, Harry, who was, by then, in a Muggle medical school because he had decided, at 16, that he wanted to be a healer and not a warrior, and Carlyle had quietly wept that night without anybody seeing. And Esme had wept openly in the morning, sat on the steps beside Rosalie Cullen. They were watching the snow. The house was warm behind them. Alice was inside at the piano with Edward, playing something that was only a little sentimental. Emmett in the kitchen had broken, per family tradition, a pie plate. Esme had not yelled at him. Carlyle was in the study, reviewing applications for a new clinic he was building. Jasper was on the stairs, reading. Sirius and Remus were, by then, married and were upstairs in the guest room arguing over a crossword. Rose, I remember what I saw that first time in the mirror. You never told me. I know. Are you telling me now? Yes, he told her. She did not cry. She had not cried that morning in November on the lawn. She did not cry now. She put her arm around him. She did not pull him close. She let him be a grown man beside her. She said very quietly, "I would have liked her, Harry. I know. I am glad that she chose us. I know. I am glad." Rose said that we chose you. I know, Rose. I am going to say something sarcastic now. Please do. Your collar, Rose Cullen said, is still a disgrace. Rose, come here, sit up, let me fix it. He sat up. She fixed it. Inside, Alice was, for no reason at all, humming. Outside, the snow kept coming, and the cedars leaned in, and the cedar house at the end of the 2-mile switchback. The house that had once, on a November night a long time ago, taken in a small, frightened, glowing baby in a hand-woven shawl, stood exactly where it had stood, patient and warm and full.